Chapter 289. Hearing that Lin Xiao had killed a group of people, everyone's expressions immediately turned serious as they looked at her in confusion. Please take a seat. Lin Hao, who was at the side, stood up and gave the chair to her. He sat down on the windowsill. After Lin Xiao sat down, he looked at everyone and said, "Just now, 2 groups of people came from a place 3 kilometers to the east. The first group was the bandits. Of the 12, I've already killed 11. Except for the leader who ran away, the others are all dead." Bandits. Hearing the words bandits, everyone was shocked. Are you talking about those man-eating bandits? Lin Feng looked at Lin Xiao with a serious expression. He didn't ignore what Lin Xiao said about another leader running away. These bandits of the apocalypse were very vengeful. As long as one escaped, they would be killed. He would definitely come back here and think of a way to take revenge. Moreover, their methods of doing things had always been extremely cruel and devoid of humanity. Otherwise, why would they eat people? Therefore, if you provoked one or a group of robbers, it was best not to leave the base for a year or 2. Otherwise, if he went out, he would definitely come looking for revenge. Lin Feng frowned slightly and asked, "What's their arcana rank? Where's the leader?" Lin Xiao said, "The lowest is level 4, and the highest leader is level 7. Level 7? You can even beat away a level 7? What level are you at now?" When he heard that the leader of the bandits was a level 7 superpower, he was on the same level as the leader of the base. The main point was that the other party had escaped. Was he beaten away? Lin Xiao shook his head and smiled, revealing his white teeth. "I'm not that powerful. At most, I can only deal with level 6 and below. The level 7 ones were scared away by Li Li. Oh, you might not know. Lily has already broken through to the 7th rank." Everyone. Mrs. Lin looks at Lin Xiao blankly. Wait a minute, Miss Lu, are you saying that Lily is now a level 7 zombie?" Lin Xiao looked at her and said with a smile, "Auntie, I told you. You can just call me Xiao Yu or Ayu too. You guys always call me Miss Lu, it feels so distant." Mrs. Lin pauses for a second and then smiles. "Oh, Feather. I'm used to calling you Miss Lu. I can't change my way of speaking." Lin Xiao smiled. Li Zheng, who was at the side, asked with a shocked expression, "Li Li is now a 2nd-grade king warrior?" Lin Xiao turned to look at him and nodded. "Yes, Li Li is now a 2nd-rank king." At this moment, Lin Feng said, "Fuck, we let the level 7 bandit leader escape. That will bring us dangerous trouble later on." Lin Xiao waved his finger at him and said, "Not necessarily. At least he doesn't know that I'm with you. Even if there's trouble, it's only us." Lin Feng looked at her. He wanted to say something but didn't. But his expression was a little worried. "Mrs. Lin says we have Lily, don't we? We're not afraid of them coming over." Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Feng and knew what he was worried about. Lin Luoran says to her mother, "Aunt Lin, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but it's hard to guard against a stab in the dark. We are not afraid of him in terms of strength, but we are afraid that he will use underhanded means. Lily is only one person. Everyone will be safe by her side, but there's no guarantee that no one will leave her." Mrs. Lin suddenly thought of this situation and nodded. "You're right." Lin Xiao continued. "And there's something else. These bandits have a secret relationship with one of the leaders in High City. They are now preparing to deal with Wu Changyue in High City. Apart from Wu Changyue, they also want to deal with Yuan Tianqing in High City. So, even if I don't kill these bandits now, they will come to us themselves." After she finished speaking, everyone looked at her in surprise. Lin Feng looked at her and asked, "How is it related to Tianqing?" "The 3 leaders in High City besides Wu Changyue are Yang Chao and Zhou Shihui. It's public that Yang Chao and Wu Changyue don't get along. But what does it have to do with Tianqing? Is it because Tianqing wants to cooperate with Wu Changyue?" Lin Xiao looked at him and nodded. "Yes, that's one of the reasons. He even hooked up with the #1 goddess in High City. That's why people are jealous. This man asked him to do business, but he went to hook up with a beauty." Lin Xiao said this sentence in his heart. "Then these bandits are..." Lin Feng looked at her and asked. Lin Xiao said, "These bandits are quite strong. Yang Chao probably wants to use his strength to secretly kill Wu Changyue, without him having to do anything. As for the benefits he promised to the bandits, I don't know if they will go back on their word later. But if it were me, I definitely wouldn't let these bandits enter the base. Because smart people wouldn't bring another person into the base after getting rid of an enemy. Moreover, this bandit's strength was at the same level as his. Lin Feng nodded and felt that Lin Xiao was right. Li Zheng then asked, so you said that we have to change our route. Are we going to look for the deputy leader first? Lin Xiao nodded at everyone and said, yes, we'll go directly to High City and increase our recruitment efforts. Once we recruit people, we'll quickly build our own base. Only by building our own castle will we be able to resist, let alone a level 7 expert. Even if it's a level 8 expert, we have the power to resist. Lin Feng nodded and said, yes, I agree. Of course, the others didn't have any objections. When are we leaving? Mrs. Lin looked at Lin Feng and then at Lin Xiao and asked. Lin Feng also looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao stood up and said, let's go now. Everyone pack up and get ready to leave. Lin Feng nodded and agreed. Okay. Everyone pack up and get ready to leave. Lin Xiao turned around and walked out of the room to Lu Jun's room. She said to Lu Jun and Xie Dong, get ready to leave. Pack up whatever you want to take with you. Lu Jun and Xie Dong looked at her in surprise and asked in confusion, why are you suddenly leaving? Did something happen? Is it related to Lily's breath just now? Lin Xiao nodded and said, we've changed our original plan of waiting for you on Tianqing here. We're going to High City to find him first. Then we'll go to the upper city together and start building the base. Huh? Why? Lu Jun asked with Tong Tong in her arms. He might run into trouble on the way, so it's better for us to meet up with them first. Lin Xiao stood at the door and watched as she handed Tong Tong to her. Trouble? What trouble? Lu Jun stuffed Tong Tong into Lin Xiao's arms and looked at her in confusion. Lin Xiao held Tong Tong and used one arm to support his buttocks. Then she said to Lu Jun, someone is watching him. I think they want to make a move after they leave High City. Chapter 290. Lin Xiao tilted her head slightly and looked up at Tong Tong, who was touching her head. She asked, is it fun? Tong Tong was already used to Lin Xiao's hoarse and unpleasant voice. Hearing her question, she stopped, but her hand didn't leave Lin Xiao's head. It's fun. Tong Tong looked at Cho Lily's long black ponytail. In fact, he also wanted to touch it, but that sister wouldn't let him. Lu Jun packed up Tong Tong's things and put them next to Lin Xiao. Then he raised his hand and carried Tong Tong. Let's go. Lin Xiao bent down to put the things into the space, then put Lu Jun and Tong Tong into the space. Then she turned around and walked out of the room with Xie Dong. In fact, these zombies didn't carry many things with them. Only Tong Tong had more things, and most of them were in Lin Xiao's space. After coming out of the room, Lin Xiao let the others go downstairs first. She released one of Yang Jianhua's cars, then let Lin Feng and the others drive it first, while she ran to the rooftop to collect the 5 zombie leaders. You guys hold this rope together. Lin Xiao found a hemp rope and let the 5 zombies hold it together. Then she took all of them into the space. Now in Lin Xiao's space, next to the previous small space. Indeed, as she had imagined, another space had appeared. And it was 3 times bigger than the previous small space. When the paranormal in the first space was killed by Lin Xiao, his space ability was only at level 3. The area of the other party's space was only as wide as a small room. And now the bald robber's space was very big. It was almost more than 200 square meters. At this time, Lin Xiao had already let the 2 zombies drag a bucket of water to the first space. Then Lin Xiao and the other 5 zombies stood at the entrance of the second space. She pointed inside and said, you guys go in and stay there. Don't run out and don't run to the lake. Don't say I didn't warn you. If you run there and get eaten, don't call me to save you. Then she looked at the lake. However, her warning was actually superfluous because the other 5 had shrunk into the small space. Then they all looked at the lake nervously. Even the old man slowly moved behind the other zombies. As soon as they entered, they sensed a powerful aura pressing down on them from the other side of the lake. She was even scarier than Cho Lily. Cho Lily's aura was still restrained, but little man's aura was not restrained at all. As if sensing a strange aura coming in, little man directly emerged from the lake and waved a few vines. Seeing the branches of the small vine, the 5 zombies immediately jumped into the second subspace. Then he hid behind the door and stuck out a few zombie heads to look at the lake. Lin Xiao looked at these level 5 zombies as if they were scared puppies. Then he turned his head and said to young man, "Okay, young man, it's enough to get to know the newcomer. Don't scare me." Then little man put the branches back into the water, and her breath was slightly restrained. The 5 zombie leaders finally calmed down. She looked at Lu Jun and saw Lu Jun put Tong Tong on the bed. Then she began to clean up the space. After that, she would probably clean up the strawberry and vegetable fields. Lin Xiao turned around and went out of the space. Then she stepped on the poles, buildings, trees and other tall objects to jump in the direction where Lin Feng and the others left. After a while she caught up with their tank. When he landed on the roof of the car, there were already 2 people occupying the roof. Qiu Lily stood in the front of the car, facing the wind, her 2 long black hair flying with the wind. Long Qingying sat cross-legged at the back of the car, her black ponytail also flying in the wind. Lin Xiao fell between the 2 of them, and looked back and forth. Then he sat cross-legged like Long Qingying. So on top of an armor tank 3 women stayed on it. Lin Xiao put on the hat and sunglasses again. Because of Lin Xiao and Qiu Lily, even if they restrained their breath. But the strong sense of oppression made the surrounding ordinary zombies retreat. After the car bypassed the abandoned cars and other obstacles on the road, it drove for a few kilometers. Suddenly someone stopped them. Lin Xiao looked at the more than 20 people blocking the road. In fact, he had already expected it. This was the second group of people who had chased after the robbers. Moreover, the 3 captives were also here. The drivers were Li Zheng and Lei Yao. After the car stopped, Lin Feng and Li Zheng got out of the car and stood next to the front. They looked at the group of people in front of them but did not say anything. The strongest among the group of people on the other side were only 2 level 6 arcanists, but they did not seem to be in good shape. They looked haggard and their bodies were in a mess. Apart from the beautiful woman that Lin Xiao had seen before, there were 3 other young women. But their looks were very ordinary, but fortunately, they had a good figure and were young. 2 rank 6 metahumans from the other side stepped forward, standing 6 meters away from Lin Feng and the rest. "We mean no harm, please don't worry. We just want to make a deal with you, but we don't know if you are willing," the 2 rank 6 paranormals said. Those 2 should be the captains of the group. "I am Chen Yuding, the captain of the Wind Court hunting team." A man in his 30s introduced himself. Then he pointed to the man beside him and said, "This is the other captain of our team, Lu Changfeng." Lin Feng looked at them expressionlessly and asked, "What do you want to trade for?" Lu Yuding said, "Weapons and food. We have a large number of rank 4 zombie cores and a small number of rank 5 zombie cores as well as water." Their original plan was not to hunt in Hangzhou's border city, but they did not expect to encounter the bandits. The most important person in their team was captured, so they chased after them. So they used up 90% of their bullets and guns as well as all their food. Lin Feng calmly refused. "We don't need water and zombie cores, and we don't have many weapons." Chen Yuding and Lu Changfeng were stunned for a moment. Then they looked at each other in surprise. Then they looked at Lin Feng and the others. They thought that Lin Feng and the others would be willing to trade with them, because they had said that they had water. Water, food, and weapons, these 3 were the things that could be used up the most, but they were also the things that they lacked the most. Especially water, they would die without it. You don't want water?" At this time, a young man behind Chen Yuding and Lu Changfeng suddenly said. But his tone was a little anxious. Chapter 291. Lin Feng calmly looked at them and said, "We don't lack water here, nor do we need corpse cores. So please step aside." But the young man's expression changed. He wanted to say something, but the moment he said it, however, Chen Yuding raised his hand and stopped him. Lu Yuding stopped the young man from speaking, then looked at Lin Feng and said, "All right then, I'm sorry to disturb you." With that, he stood to the side, slightly lowered his head and said, "Make way." The first to move was Lu Changfeng, but the others weren't willing to move. Lu Changfeng looked at them and said, "Make way." "Captain Lu." Everyone looked at the 2 of them, wanting to say something but hesitating. Chen Yuding looked at his men with a cold face and said, "I order you to make way. What are you doing? Do you want to be killed by a car?" Only then did De Kong slowly move to the sides of the road. Outside the base, sometimes he was forced by the situation. Hunting teams would often work together temporarily or make deals with each other. So when they found the 3 people who were taken away by the robbers, they found that there was not enough food and weapons. Just as he was worrying, he heard the sound of a car. Therefore, they knew that another hunting team must have passed by. That's why he wanted to take the risk of being attacked by the zombies and rush to the road to stop the car. But he didn't expect that there would be so many zombies in the vicinity before he heard the sound of the car. But as the car slowly approached, the surrounding zombies gradually retreated for some unknown reason. Lin Feng turned to look at Lin Xiao, who was on the roof of the car. Qiu Lily had already smelled the scent of strangers from afar, so she disappeared before the group of people appeared. So now, only Lin Xiao, who was wearing a hat and sunglasses, and Long Qingying, who was facing away from the front of the car, were on the roof. Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Feng without saying a word. Seeing Lin Xiao's attitude, Lin Feng felt that she would not exchange anything with these people. So he turned around and got into the car. Li Zheng followed Lin Feng into the car. Then, Chun Yuding and the others watched unwillingly as Lin Feng drove the car over. Just as Lin Feng's car was about to pass them, a woman suddenly rushed out from the side. Then he ran to the front of the car and stopped it again. Lu Ting. When they saw the woman's actions, Chun Yuding, Lu Chongfeng, and the others were shocked, and their expressions turned grim as they cried out involuntarily at the same time. The woman who was taken away by the robbers was Lu Ting. She rushed to the front of Lin Feng's car. Fortunately, the car wasn't driving very fast. The car came to a sudden stop in front of her. Lin Feng and Li Zheng got out of the car impatiently. "What are you doing? Do you want to die?" Lu Ting shook her head and walked to Lin Feng from the front of the car. She raised her charming face and looked at him with a hint of temptation in her eyes. "What do you want in exchange for food and weapons? As long as you give me food, I'll do anything. Even if it's that, it's fine." Lu Ting's expression didn't change much. However, there was a hint of unnaturalness in his eyes. However, for the sake of food, she forced herself to speak. As long as it was a man, he would understand what she meant. She would have to use her body in exchange. This kind of flesh trade was common in the post-apocalyptic world. Whether it was inside or outside the base, this kind of situation would occur. Lin Feng looked at her and shook his head. "Sorry, my wife and child are in the car." His meaning was obvious. He rejected her face to face. He also hinted that she shouldn't teach children bad things. Lu Ting's face flashed with embarrassment. She didn't expect that her beauty wouldn't work. In the past, it was very effective every time. However, she quickly adjusted her expression and said with a smile, "Then I'm sorry, but you really can't exchange with us? I can also serve other people." As she spoke, she looked at Li Zheng and then looked at the car. Finally, she looked up at Lin Xiao. Because Lin Xiao had been sitting with his upper body leaning forward, his elbows on both sides of his knees, and his fingers were crossed and clasped at his chin. He was looking at the woman's actions with interest. Because her upper body was leaning forward, and her clothes were loose, it was hard to see the situation in front of her chest. In addition, she was wearing a hat and sunglasses on her face, and no hair could be seen at the edge of the hat. No matter how you looked at it, it was the appearance of a man. Lu Ting's last look was to seduce Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at this woman with amusement. The decadent and desperate look he saw on the robbers was all gone. Now she was very bold to use her beauty on the road. Lin Feng and Li Zheng also saw the woman's last look, and then they both looked back at Lin Xiao with unfathomable eyes. Lin Xiao looked at the woman, and then turned to look at Chun Yuding's group. He found that they all looked very conflicted. One side seemed to disagree with Lu Ting's actions, especially Lu Chongfeng. The other side seemed to hope that Lu Ting could succeed. They didn't have a car. Even if they walked back to High City, it was more than 300 kilometers away. Even if they sped up, it would take at least 7 or 8 days. And in these 7 or 8 days, they would encounter dangerous obstacles such as zombies. Without food and weapons, they wouldn't be able to walk back to High City just by drinking water. So, in order to return to High City alive at this time, they could only pray that the people in the car were willing to exchange food or weapons with them. They could see that the car was so well made and domineering. The people in the car must have abundant food and weapons. Seeing that Lin Feng and Lin Xiao didn't respond to her, Lu Ting became anxious. She looked at Lin Feng anxiously, and her eyes became slightly red. With a helpless look on his face, he begged them, "I beg you, please help us. We can do whatever you want us to do. Just give us food and weapons." Lin Feng and Li Zheng saw that this woman was ready to use her best move, and looked at Lin Xiao helplessly. When the woman was being unreasonable, they couldn't do anything. At this time Lin Xiao suddenly stood up. Because she was standing on the roof of the car, Chan Yuding, Lu Chongfeng, and the others could clearly see that she was a woman. She couldn't help it, her breasts were too big. Lin Xiao nimbly jumped down from the roof, and then walked in front of Lu Ting, who was stunned. She reached out her hand and gently hooked her chin. She faintly opened her mouth and asked in a hoarse voice, "Are you willing to do anything?" Lu Ting immediately came back to her senses, but her expression was a little unnatural. She still nodded calmly and looked at Lin Xiao with determination. "That's right, as long as you don't want my life. I'm willing to do anything." Although she was forcing herself to say it, her chin already had a layer of goosebumps from Lin Xiao's touch. She didn't mind doing it with men. But if it was with women, Lu Ting wasn't a lesbian, this was something she couldn't get over. Chapter 292. Lin Xiao looked at Lu Ting with a faint smile and didn't say a word. After 4 or 5 seconds, Lu Ting almost couldn't take it anymore. He then released her chin and said to her, "Unfortunately, I'm not interested in women. I'm not a lesbian either." Lu Ting breathed a sigh of relief and said to Lin Xiao, "What do you want us to do?" She could tell that Lin Xiao's attitude wasn't as firm as the two men. She also noticed that when the two men made their decision, they turned around to look at the woman in sunglasses. No matter what, as long as the other party was willing to give them food and weapons, it would be fine. Lin Xiao looked at Lu Ting. This woman's observation was quite sharp. She turned to look at Chan Yuding and the others, then walked over. "If you really want to trade with us, I have a job here that requires manpower. I just don't know if you guys are willing," Lin Xiao said as she looked at Chan Yuding and the others. What she meant was that she needed men, not women. Chan Yuding and the others also understood what she meant and immediately asked in surprise, "What job?" "As long as we can do it, we will do it," Lin Xiao said. "Well, a construction worker." "Construction workers?" Hearing Lin Xiao's answer, the people on the other side were all stunned. They almost thought they had heard wrong. But Lu Chongfeng quickly reacted and asked, "May I ask what it is to build? Where is the location? How long will it take? How much do we stand to gain?" Hearing Lu Chongfeng's question, the others nodded in agreement and asked, "Yes, you're talking about construction workers. What were they planning to build? A house?" Lin Xiao said, "Build a wall. If there were no accidents, it would take about 6 months to a year. Of course, I won't force you. The benefits are rice and flour. I'll give them to you on a daily basis. As for the location, I can't tell you for now. But I promise it's a safe place. What do you think?" Everyone had different reactions when they heard Lin Xiao's words. Lu Yuding and the others did not expect such a good thing to happen. There was actually such a job for them. In a safe place, as long as you help build the walls, you can get rice and flour. One had to know that rice and flour were very precious food nowadays. In the base, only those who had the ability could get a little. Lin Feng and Li Zheng looked at each other without saying a word. They didn't plan to recruit these people along the way because they didn't know their information. Moreover, they had to go to Sea City first and then return to the upper city of Hangzhou. If he were to recruit people along the way and they were all strangers, it would be troublesome if something happened. He just didn't expect Lin Xiao to make such a request at this time. "Are you telling the truth? How can we trust you?" Lu Ting suddenly asked Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao turned around and shrugged at her, saying, "Believe it or not, it doesn't matter to me. In any case, I'm not the one begging you now. Please understand your current attitude. And even if you don't come, we will continue to find other people. Besides, we're going to see City Base now. If you're willing to cooperate, I can send you back to the base for free." With that, Lin Xiao didn't say anything else. He turned around and walked to the car. "I'll give you 3 minutes to think about it. We won't wait after 3 minutes. As she spoke, she jumped onto the roof of the car and sat cross-legged on it. Chan Yuding and Lu Chongfeng looked at each other, then turned to look at the others. "What do you guys think? Although it's not very trustworthy, we don't have any better choice now." Lu Chongfeng asked everyone. "I'll go. We have no weapons and no food now. We can't last more than a few days even if we force ourselves. And this place is too far from Sea City. If we don't starve to death, we will be eaten by zombies. Yes, I'll go too. I'm willing to believe what she said is true. But what if she's lying to us? Although they don't look like robbers, we can't guarantee that it's not a possibility. And that woman didn't say where the location is. What if we're taken to a dangerous place? What if we can't come back in the end? But we don't have anything good to gain. Does she need to lie to us? I don't think she needs to. Maybe she really needs manpower. She just said to build a wall. Is she going to build a small base there? Build a small base? With just these people? I still can't believe it. I don't care about anything else. I just don't starve to death. I'll do anything. I still have to support my mother. Isn't wealth found in danger? If we don't take risks, how do we know whether there are treasures or not? Yes, we all need food. Even we can earn food by ourselves. But the most important thing now is to return to the base alive, isn't it? I agree. I agree. Looking at everyone's opinions, most of them could only take the risk to believe Lin Xiao's words. Chun Yuding and Lu Chongfeng looked at each other, then made up their minds and nodded. They turned around and walked a few steps towards Lin Xiao. They looked up at her and said, "We agree to cooperate as long as we can return to Sea City safely. We are willing to help you build the wall for free for a month." Lin Xiao clapped her hands and then nodded. She said, "Okay, if you guys agree, then we'll go to Sea City first. I'll tell you the next step." Saying that, she suddenly waved her hand. Bang! Suddenly a green steel chariot the size of a small bus appeared out of thin air. Then it fell heavily to the side, creating a cloud of dust. When they saw this chariot that was the same as the one Lin Xiao was riding, Chun Yuding and the others were stunned. They stared at the chariot closely, then turned to look at Lin Xiao in disbelief. "I'll lend this car to you for now. Remember to return it to me when we return to Sea City," Lin Xiao said to them lightly. Really? Chun Yuding looked at Lin Xiao with a dumbfounded expression. Lin Xiao just looked at him with a faint smile. Lin Feng and Li Zheng turned around and got into the car together. Then the car under Lin Xiao started and drove away. Seeing Lin Xiao's car drive away, Chun Yuding and the others could not help but immediately rush to the second car. "Hurry! Get in the car first." "It's true, that's great." They opened the car door and all got in. Now, regardless of whether what Lin Xiao said was true or not, at least with this car, they could return to the base safely. Then the credibility of Lin Xiao's words immediately increased by 50%. What's more, he didn't expect the woman who looked like a domineering general to be a spatial ability user. In their hearts, space ability users were the weakest type of people, although Lin Xiao looked very imposing. Chapter 293. The two cars drove for a few hours before stopping at a roadside gas station. Lin Feng and Lin Xiao stood in an open space, opened the map in their hands, pointed to a point and said to Lin Xiao, "We should be able to get to this town before nightfall and spend the night here. We'll leave early tomorrow morning and arrive at Haiqing by noon." Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Then let's find a place to spend the night here." On the other side, Li Zheng and the others found some stones to make a stove, and then found some wooden blocks, such as the wooden tables and chairs in the gas station's convenience store. They were all chopped into long wooden blocks. Chun Yuding and the others were not familiar with them, so they didn't want to interfere and disturb them. They just stood there awkwardly and watched. At the same time, they helped to defend against the sudden appearance of zombies. Li Zheng shouted to them, "Which one of you is a fire elemental? Come and help make a fire." Go and help." Chun Yuding immediately called a team member over. Except for the two who were still unconscious and were being carried away, there were a total of 21 people. Although the car Lin Xiao gave them was a little crowded, it was still able to fit. No, there were still a few people sitting on the roof. Lin Xiao watched Li Zheng and the others make a fire, and then turned to walk to the mountain behind the gas station. The location was a bit desolate, except for a gas station and a convenience store. There was also a small building, which should be the gas station staff's dormitory. There were low hills around and there was a small forest on the hillside. Lin Xiao walked towards the small forest. After entering the small forest, she looked around. After a while, she saw a white figure standing on the top of a tree. Seeing Lin Xiao walk in, Qiu Lily pouted and said to her unhappily, "I want to stay in the space, it's so dusty outside." There were no tall buildings along the way, so Qiu Lily kept jumping on the top of the tree. As a result, she ate a lot of dust along the way. Lin Xiao walked to a rock at the side and jumped onto it. "Then come here." Qiu Lily immediately landed on the stone, and then reached out to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao grabs her hand and brings her into the space. Seeing Lin Xiao bringing Qiu Lily in, Lu Jun asked her curiously, "Why did you come in?" Qiu Lily ran to her sofa and sat down. Then she lay down on the sofa lazily. Lin Xiao replied to Lu Jun, "Oh, there's too much dust on the road. She didn't like it, so she asked me to bring it in." Lu Jun asked, "Where are we now?" "I just entered the Fuyang City area. I'm resting at a gas station on the road for 2 hours," said Lin Xiao. They continued their journey in the afternoon. "Tonight, we should be able to enter a small town in Yuhang district to spend the night. Tomorrow morning, we will enter Jiaxing City." "Oh," Lu Jun nodded and responded. At this time, Meng Meng was playing with birds in the forest on the other side. Suddenly, she felt Qiu Lily's aura disappear. She was stunned and immediately turned to look in the direction where Qiu Lily's aura had disappeared. He found that there was only Lin Xiao's aura there. Meng Meng's figure flashed as she ran towards Lin Xiao. Just as Lin Xiao was about to turn around and return to the gas station, he suddenly felt a gust of wind rushing toward him. She calmly dodged to the side, then turned her head to look at Meng Meng, who was sprawled on the rock she had been standing on. "What are you doing?" "Ah, where's Lily Lily?" Meng Meng lay on the rock and growled at her. Lin Xiao looked at her and teased her. "I ate Lily." After spending a few days with this zombie, Lin Xiao felt that this zombie was really like a naughty child. Sometimes she was naughty and willful, but she was also very playful. It was just that her personality was a little strange. However, she always lingered around Qiu Lily. Although she was afraid of Qiu Lily, she seemed to like Qiu Lily very much. If Tong Tong and Xiao Lu were her little toys, then Qiu Lily was her big toy. Also, she felt that Qiu Lily was also a partner that she recognized. Although Lin Xiao didn't know what was wrong with her, he couldn't help but tease her. "A wu liar." Meng Meng howled and immediately moved her limbs, pouncing towards Lin Xiao. "You already know I'm lying to you. What are you so nervous about?" Lin Xiao leaped backward, then flipped over and ran to a tree branch. He said leisurely to her, "Ow wow, I don't care, let Lily out." Meng Meng ignored her and kept howling at her. Then she continued to pounce on her. Lin Xiao said helplessly, "I didn't catch Lily. She wanted to go in herself." Then she jumped down from the tree. However, just as she jumped down, Meng Meng suddenly jumped in midair, stepped on a tree branch and pounced towards Lin Xiao, who was about to land on the ground. Lin Xiao was just playing with her and didn't really want to hide from her. In the end, she was pounced on from behind. Meng Meng pounced on Lin Xiao's back and wrapped her arms and legs tightly around her neck and waist. Then she looked like she didn't care. "Ow wow, I don't care. Let Lily out." Lin Xiao steadied herself and turned to look at her speechlessly. "What are you doing? Lily doesn't like to stay outside. There's dust all along the way. What can I do if she doesn't want to stay outside? Come down." "Ow wow, no no." Meng Meng wrapped around Lin Xiao's back and shook her head hard. Lin Xiao quickly raised her hand to grab her. "Stop, stop. Stop it. Get down here." However, Meng Meng seemed to be shaking more and more vigorously. She refused to come down even after being pulled by Lin Xiao. 2 claws wrapped around Lin Xiao's head. Lin Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She pulled her arm down. "It's useless even if you scratch me. It's Lily herself who refuses to come out. It's none of my business." But Meng Meng refused to let go of her. The two of them pulled and Lin Xiao's hat fell off. Then a bald head appeared. "Pa pa pa." Meng Meng opened her palm and slapped Lin Xiao's bald head to express his dissatisfaction. Seeing that she refused to come down, Lin Xiao threatened, "If you do this again, I'll get Lily to chase you away. Are you going to listen to me?" However, upon hearing her threat, Meng Meng immediately flared up. He opened his mouth and bit down on the bald head in front of him. "Ah, holy shit. You stinking brat. Your saliva is all over my head." This time Lin Xiao exploded. He immediately let out a strange cry. Although Meng Meng didn't feel any pain from biting her, The sticky feeling on her head was very clear. This time Lin Xiao couldn't stay calm. She exerted force in her hand, pulled her out and threw her out. Ow wow! Meng Meng was forcefully pulled away and landed on the ground as nimbly as a cat. Then she immediately bared her teeth at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao. This brat really couldn't be tolerated. Chapter 294. Lin Xiao wiped the top of her head with her hand. It was indeed wet. She said to Meng Meng with a dark face, "It's useless even if you bite me. Lily won't come out for the time being. Why don't you just follow me? When she comes out, can't you find her and play with her again? Really? Be obedient, or I'll ask Lily to beat you up." With that she swung her hand, picked up her hat and put it on. Then she turned around and walked out. Meng Meng glared at Lin Xiao angrily, but she didn't dare to hit her again, because she was really afraid that Lin Xiao would ask Lily to drive her away. Meng Meng, who had nowhere to vent her anger, turned around and waved her hands at a tree that was as thick as a calf. Then she fiercely slapped it left and right. The whole tree rustled because of her, and a lot of leaves fell down. Lin Xiao, who was walking out, heard the movement behind her and smiled helplessly. Then she walked towards the gas station. Li Zheng and the others were cooking a large pot of lean meat porridge in a round iron pot when they saw Lin Xiao return. Seeing Lin Xiao return, Lin Hao took a large bowl of porridge and handed it to Lin Xiao. "Tong Tong's lunch." Lin Xiao took it and nodded. Then she turned her head to look at the people of the Wind Court team. She saw that they were all holding a bowl of porridge and squatting in their respective corners to eat. She wasn't afraid of the heat and was so anxious that it seemed like she wanted to pour all the porridge into her stomach. She took Tong Tong's share and entered the space in a flash. Then she walked to Lu Jun's side. "Tong Tong's food is here." Lu Jun took the bowl and shouted to Tong Tong, who was playing with Little Man by the lake, "Tong Tong, come and eat." Tong Tong was squatting by the lake and playing with two of Little Man's vine tentacles. After hearing Lu Jun's shout, he didn't get up immediately. Instead, he continued to talk to Little Man, "I'm going to eat. Do you want to eat?" Little Man put a vine on his hand and said, "Little Man has eaten. Tong Tong, you go eat first." She had just eaten a few living people in the morning. After absorbing the robber's superpower, she was waiting for Lin Xiao to come in and repair her body. However, Lin Xiao didn't seem to have the time, so Little Man stored the energy. "Oh." Tong Tong nodded and stood up. As he spoke, he turned around and said, "Then I'll go eat." Lin Xiao and Lu Jun watched as Tong Tong walked back from the lake. They were not worried that Tong Tong would fall into the lake. Because Little Man was still in the water, Little Man wouldn't let anything happen to him. She walked to the lakeside and looked at Little Man, asking Little Man, "How much energy have you absorbed?" Little Man wrapped around Lin Xiao's hand and replied, "There are a lot of them. One of them has a lot of energy." Lin Xiao knew that she was talking about the second brother's energy, and that second brother happened to be a Logia type. She asked curiously, "Hey, that person's ability is also a vine. Just like you." As a result, Little Man waved her vine tail at her and protested, it's not the same, he's red." Lin Xiao looked at her with a smile. "It's just a different color. Why are you so excited?" Little Man said, "Mommy, come down quickly, Little Man can repair it for you again. Maybe your hair will grow out." Lin Xiao was stunned and then looked at her hesitantly. "Can I? Is the energy enough?" Little Man said, enough. Lin Xiao thought about it and said, "Okay, but come back at night. I still have to go out and hurry with them later. After finding a place to spend the night, I'll come in again." Little Man replied, "Oh." Lin Xiao turned back to Cho Lily and the others and then found a teapot on the table. Then she walked to the lakeside and filled the teapot with water. Then she turned and walked toward the two subspaces. She walked toward the second subspace and saw a few heads suddenly popping out at the door from a distance. They seemed to feel that Lin Xiao was coming, so they dared to stick their heads out to observe the situation. They had been hiding inside and didn't dare to move. Lu Jun blew the hot porridge for Tong Tong and asked Cho Lily, "When did she have a subspace?" "I don't know." Cho Lily was lying down and playing with her hair. Hearing Lu Jun's words, she turned her head and looked in Lin Xiao's direction. When Lin Xiao walked to the door of the second subspace, she looked at them. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Are you so afraid of her?" All the zombies roar scared. Very scared. Too scary. Lin Xiao stood at the door and held the teapot. She said, "Take out the cups, don't you want to drink water?" Hearing this, the 5 zombie leaders immediately took out their cups. Each of them had a bag with them, which was given to them by Lin Xiao. It was for them to put their cups and their belongings. Lin Xiao filled their cups one by one and then left with the teapot. When she walked past the first subspace, she turned her head and looked inside. Sure enough, she saw 2 level 4 zombies soaking in the water. Because they had Lin Xiao and Little Man's permission, these 2 zombies could go to the lakeside to get water. Although every time they went there, they would drag the buckets into the water until there was no energy left, and then drag the buckets over. In the end, he was too slow once, and Little Man threw a few vines at him. They dragged their buckets into the lake, and then dragged the buckets filled with water in front of them. From then on, number 1 and number 2 were well behaved. Every time they filled the buckets with water, they were very fast. Lin Xiao walked past the first subspace with the teapot, walked to the sofa and sat down, then put the teapot on the table. Your 2 followers are almost ready for treatment. Let them go out to find energy cores tonight. Qiu Lily looked at number 1 and number 2 and nodded. Lin Xiao asked curiously, "I haven't asked you, were those 2 related to you when they were alive?" Qiu Lily shook her head and said, "I didn't. When I met them, it was a few years ago. At that time, the end of the world hadn't been long, and they were still alive. When I wanted to get close to humans, I was kicked out. At that time, those people were very afraid of me, and I didn't do anything before they attacked me. Only the 2 of them didn't show any negative emotions towards me, and at that time they even helped me." Lin Xiao looked over there in surprise, then turned back to continue listening to Qiu Lily. Qiu Lily continued, "I followed them secretly for a few days. After a few days, these 2 people were pushed out by those people to block the zombies. I didn't have time to save them at that time, so I had to wait for them to become zombies and keep them by my side." Lin Xiao and Lu Jun looked at her. No wonder she kept bringing these 2 to follow them outside. Qiu Lily turned over, lying on the sofa, and looked at the subspace over there. She said, "I hope Little Man can help them recover some of their memories." Lin Xiao turned her head to look over there, then looked at Qiu Lily. She knew that Qiu Lily had kept them by her side for a few years, and had feelings for them, although they were just 2 zombies without memories. Chapter 295. Lin Xiao didn't sit for long before they exited the space. Because everything was almost ready, they could continue their journey. After starving for a few days, the Fengting hunting team drank a bowl of hot porridge. Their essence chi had recovered significantly, and they looked much more spirited. During this period, only Lin Xiao and Long Qingying were outside. Lin Wenwen and Chang Wangshua's mother didn't come out of the car. When Chen Yuding and the others saw Lin Hao and the others put the porridge in the car, they knew there were still people in the car. "Get in the car, get in the car. Check the car and get ready to go," Lin Feng shouted to the others. After getting on the chariots, the 2 chariots headed towards Sea City. Lin Xiao and Long Qingying still sat on the roof of the car under the sun. Although Lin Xiao was very hot, she didn't enter the car because she needed to sit on the roof to deter the zombies around. It was already October, and although it was hot during the day, she didn't enter the car. But at night there was the coolness of autumn. Of course, the autumn night after the apocalypse would be very cold. But there was a lot of dust on the road. When the sun set, they entered Yuhang district. Along the way, Chen Yuding and Lu Changfeng found something strange. They didn't see any zombies. Why was that? They noticed this phenomenon in the morning, but because they were on the highway or in the suburbs, they didn't pay much attention to it. But when they reached the center of Hangzhou, it was a zombie city with a dense number of zombies. In the end, they managed to pass through without any danger. Lin Feng drove around the city because there were many people in the city and the buildings were dense. So there were a lot of abandoned cars, stones, and large objects on the road blocking the way. Because they were in a hurry, Lin Feng didn't look for a safe place to spend the night. With Lin Xiao and Qiu Lily by his side, he would be safe no matter where he went. Finally, when it was dark, Lin Feng found an entertainment club. There were hotel rooms, bars, foot massage, sauna, billiards, and all kinds of other entertainment places. After Lin Feng stopped the car, the zombies in the club all ran away. After parking the car in front of the club, Lin Feng and the others got out of the car and looked up at the door and the signboard. Let's spend the night here. The building here is sealed, so it's relatively safe. Compared to the relaxed Lin Feng and the others, Chan Yuding and the others got off the car with vigilant expressions. Then he found that there was still not a single zombie around. Chan Yuding, Lu Changfeng, and the others all had strange expressions on their faces. Why weren't there any zombies nearby? Logically, there should be a lot of zombies here. But along the way, when the zombies saw them, they would turn around and run. The two of them suspected that Lin Feng and the others must have something. Even the zombies were afraid of him. He entered the clubhouse because it was already night. There was no electricity in the city, so they were all looking around with flashlights. As a result, there was not a single zombie in the clubhouse, even though it was dark. Lin Feng and the others found the location of the restaurant and cooked some simple food. 20 to 30 people were gathered in the dining room, waiting for dinner to be ready. While no one was paying attention, Lin Xiao left. She flashed into the space and said to Cho Lily, "Lily, go out and keep an eye on those people. I'm going to the bottom of the lake tonight." Cho Lily sat up from the sofa and nodded, "Okay." After sending Cho Lily out, Lin Xiao continued to release the other zombie leaders, and number 1 and number 2. Then she walked to the lake and dragged a chair to put it on the ground by the lake. She took off her hat and sunglasses and took off her clothes. Then she walked into the lake naked. Tong Tong had already fallen asleep in Lu Jun's arms. Lu Jun sat on the sofa and watched Lin Xiao's back as she went into the water. Her back was beautiful, and her waist was very thin. Well, her butt was perky, her legs were long, and her skin was white. If she had long hair behind her, it would be a beautiful scene. Unfortunately, her head was bare. Lu Jun thought in her heart. Lin Xiao touched his stomach and felt that it was still a strange feeling. It was like cotton. After stepping into the water, the branches of the small vine wrapped around her. Then it pulled her down to the bottom of the lake. Countless branches and tentacles wrapped around Lin Xiao's body, gradually wrapping her into a jade-white human cocoon. Lin Xiao could feel a familiar energy seeping into her body, and then her body, which could only feel hot but not cold, began to slowly heat up. Lin Xiao didn't know if she could grow her hair back this time, but she knew. At least her belly should recover a bit. Her belly was getting hotter and hotter, like a ball of fire burning. Her throat was also burning, and so was her head. The jade-white human cocoon reflected a layer of faint green light from the inside. After a long time, the light gradually faded, and then a black fog suddenly came out of the human cocoon. The black fog didn't melt in the water, but actively swam. The moment the black mist appeared, the jade-white vine suddenly let go of Lin Xiao at lightning speed. The black fog quickly wrapped Lin Xiao's whole body. Without the support of the small vine, Lin Xiao's body didn't sink to the bottom of the lake, and just floated in the middle of the lake. When Lin Xiao woke up, she found that it was pitch black in front of her. She thought she was still not awake. But after 2 seconds, she suddenly found that the darkness in front of her was just her own fog. With a thought, the black fog immediately gathered in her palm. The darkness in front of her also dispersed. Lin Xiao then realized that she was still at the bottom of the lake. Seeing that the black fog around Lin Xiao had drilled into her palm, Little Vine, who had been guarding below, immediately stretched out her branches. "Mama, mama, mama, you're awake?" The small vine wrapped around Lin Xiao's waist and lifted her up. Lin Xiao replied in her heart. How long has it been?" The small vine said. "Not long, a few hours." In fact, sometimes Lin Xiao was very curious. What was the background of this small vine? She seemed to have a very young mind, but she knew a lot of things. In addition to acting coquettishly, she also knew a lot of common sense. Lin Xiao came out of the water, and then swam towards the shore. The first thing she did after reaching the shore was to put on her clothes. Your hair seems to have grown longer. But it's so short." A voice suddenly sounded beside her, and Lu Jun appeared like a ghost. Lin Xiao stopped putting on her clothes and turned to look at her. Then she raised a hand and touched the top of her head. Then she understood what Lu Jun said. It seemed to have grown long. It did grow. But she touched a layer of short thorns. It was probably like the kind of hair that had just been shaved, and the remaining dregs were a little longer than hers. Then Lu Jun stabbed her again. Why can Lily's hair grow so long? Yours just popped out a little, right? Ha ha ha. I feel that Lily and the small vine have some unspeakable relationship. Chapter 296. Lin Xiao silently looked at Lu Jun, with an expression of, "I'll hit you if you keep talking." Lu Jun turned to look at the lake with a smile, and then asked, "Aren't you going to ask little man about your current situation?" Lin Xiao then remembered that she had to ask. "Little man." She put on her clothes, turned her head and shouted towards the lake. Suddenly she touched her belly. Huh! It became hard. Little man emerged from the lake, stretching out her vine tentacles to the lake. Then she wrapped them around Lin Xiao's hand. "Mama," Lin Xiao asked her, "Little man, why is it so hard for my hair to grow? Lily's hair can grow so long, but I can only grow a little thorny." Little man said, "Mommy, I've concentrated all my energy on your belly. The recovery of your hair and throat will be a little slower, but Mommy's hair is alive now, it was dead before. Mommy doesn't need to look for little man to heal her hair now, because it can slowly grow out on its own, but it may be a little slower." Lin Xiao looked at her in surprise. "Huh? Can it grow out on its own now? Isn't it like a normal person?" Lu Jun also looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. From what she said, did it mean that her hair could grow out like a normal person? Not like zombies like them whose hair was dead. Little man said, Yeah, that's it, Mama. Little man is a little tired." Seeing that little man's tentacles were not twisting as vigorously as usual, Lin Xiao said, "Well, if you're tired, go and have a rest." "Thank you, little man," Little man said unhappily. "Mama, you're thanking little man again. Mama makes little man feel like an outsider." Seeming to feel that little man was a little wronged, Lin Xiao quickly touched the vines on her wrist. She said, "Sorry, I was wrong. My dear little man is so cute. How can you be an outsider? We are a family." Hearing this, little man became happy. "Yeah, little man is the cutest. Then little man will go to sleep, Mama. Call little man if you need anything." After saying that, she let go of Lin Xiao's hand and the vines retreated into the water. Lu Jun looked at Lin Xiao and asked curiously, "Little man, are you unhappy? What is her relationship with you? You've only said thank you and she's already upset." Lin Xiao shook his head and said, "I don't know what her relationship with me is, but the moment she appeared, I saw her. Just call me, Mom." Lu Jun's eyes widened as he looked at her in disbelief. She called you Mommy? It can't really be your child, right?" Lin Xiao looked at her with a strange expression and asked, "Are you talking about me? Or Lu Tianyu's? Could it be that I've been pregnant before but I don't know about it now?" Lu Jun lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "Before the base was destroyed, there was no news of the leader being pregnant. But even if you're really pregnant, you won't announce it so soon, right? Besides, no one saw your belly getting bigger at that time." As she spoke, she looked at Lin Xiao's abdomen. Lin Xiao shook her head. "But my current body is no longer my original one. Even if I was pregnant before, the child might have disappeared. It can't be that. The child's soul was reborn with me, right?" Speaking of this, she suddenly froze. Then she looked at Lu Jun silently. "It seems possible." Lu Jun also looked at her. Both of them were silent for 7 or 8 seconds. Lin Xiao covered her forehead and said in disbelief, "Wait a minute, let me calm down. That's impossible." Lu Jun widened her eyes and said, "Why is it impossible? Aren't you here? Why can't the child come over?" Lin Xiao suddenly thought of another question. She put down her hand and asked, "Wait a minute, you said I'm pregnant. Who is that man?" Lu Jun looked at her and was silent for 3 seconds before she suddenly said, "I can only say that before the base was betrayed by him, he has always been by your side." Lin Xiao looked at her and said seriously, "You mean Yang Jianhua?" Both of them were silent again. But Lin Xiao's face suddenly darkened, and then she said in a cold voice, "You mean I had a relationship with Yang Jianhua before, and then I was pregnant with his child. But would that scumbag betray the base along with me, and the child even before the child was discovered? Is this the case?" Suddenly feeling the pressure around Lin Xiao getting lower and lower, Lu Jun frowned and said, "Don't get excited. This is just our guess before you recover your memory. These are just fictitious assumptions. Maybe the child wasn't brought over by you. Maybe the child's father is not Yang Jianhua, but someone else." Lin Xiao took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Thinking about Lu Jun's words, they were indeed reasonable. She suddenly thought of the environment she saw when she went down to the bottom of the lake, that kind of purple and dark red. Now thinking about it, she felt that it shouldn't be her uterus. No way, little Man couldn't really be her child. Let me calm down first, Lin Xiao said with a dull expression, and then flashed out of the space. After coming out, Lin Xiao stood on the roof of the club and lowered her head to touch her stomach. She didn't know why after listening to Lu Jun's words. Lin Xiao was very concerned about this matter, and even had a strange kind of expectation. Moreover, did Yang Jianhua have this kind of relationship with her? If that was the case, then wasn't she blind to fall for that man before? Really blind? Thinking about the Yang Jianhua she saw now, and thinking that she had slept with this man before, she only felt a burst of nausea in her heart. Lin Xiao put her hand on her lower abdomen, thinking that if it was the child's soul that was reborn with her. What kind of appearance did the child have in her space? Little Man said that when she reached level 5 she could come out. Then how did she come out? What method did she use? Could it be that she gave birth to it? But her current body and her stomach was empty. Although the uterus might still be there, after turning into a zombie it had already died. Could it give birth to another life? She didn't know why, but Lin Xiao suddenly remembered that this body had done it with Wu Changyue before it died. Her mind suddenly flashed with a possibility. No, right. If it was Wu Changyue's essence, Lu Qianyu's egg, and the baby's soul that she brought with her. Lin Xiao felt that if the child was really born, then she must go to do a DNA test. Just as Lin Xiao was still struggling with the matter of the child on the roof, her expression suddenly changed slightly. Then she walked to the edge of the roof and looked down. In the middle of the night she saw a few sneaky figures below. They walked back and forth beside the chariot that Lin Xiao had given to the Wind Court team. Lin Xiao frowned slightly. She put on her hat and then hid her figure. She turned transparent and jumped down from the roof. Chapter 297. Next to the car were Lu Chongfeng and Lu Ting, as well as 2 other members of their team. Lu Chongfeng had a disapproving expression on his face and said in a low voice, "Lu Ting, it's immoral of you to do this. They helped us, but we're going to steal from them." Lu Ting said disdainfully, "Brother, do you think they're really helping us?" "I don't think so. They said they're recruiting us to be construction workers and giving us rice and flour. That sounds nice, but there's no such thing nowadays. They must have some unspeakable secret. Maybe they want us to die? Besides, I'm just taking the car away. I didn't do anything to hurt them, did I? If I wanted to kill them, they wouldn't be able to resist now." Lu Chongfeng was silent for a while and then continued, "But if we leave, what about Chen Yuding and the others? They'll be harmed." Lu Ting seemed to be a little angry and said, "What does it have to do with us? Both of you are captains, but why does everyone only listen to him? Why doesn't he take you seriously? And those 2 disabled people, I already said to throw them away so that they won't bring us trouble on the way back." He didn't want to bring us any trouble along the way, but he insisted on bringing it back. What's the use of taking them back? Can they still come back to life? The 2 useless people she was talking about were the 2 young boys who had been taken away by the robbers with her. Lu Chongfeng said with a gloomy face, "Lu Ting, as long as they're not dead, there's hope. Besides, aren't we already halfway back safely? Just bear with it and we'll be back to the base tomorrow. Why do you have to do this?" Lu Ting turned to look at the car next to her and reached out to touch it. She said with a greedy face, "Brother, you're thinking too much. That's why Chen Yuding always suppressed you. Brother, look at this car. Isn't it cool? And isn't the performance of the car awesome? And the weapons on the top are not something ordinary people like us can get. Brother, don't you want such an awesome car? With this car, won't we be much safer when we go out on missions in the future?" She slowly tempted Lu Chongfeng. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Lu Chongfeng's eyes wavered as he looked at the car. There was no man who didn't like cars. Moreover, this was a military-grade tank. Its combat value and defense value were many times higher than the ordinary vehicles that he had modified himself. Lu Ting urged impatiently, "Brother, make up your mind quickly. The hypnosis effect of Alu's arcana is about to disappear. When they wake up, we won't have a chance." Although Lu Chongfeng was somewhat moved, he was still somewhat hesitant in his heart. At this moment, Lin Xiao quietly moved to Lu Ting's side and reached out his hand. He suddenly grabbed her slender neck and pressed her against the car. Bam! Lu Ting was caught off guard and was pinned against the car. She screamed in fear. Then, he looked at the empty space in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. He couldn't see anything. But the feeling of his neck being squeezed tightly by a hand was so real. Cough. Cough. Blarg. The feeling of suffocation immediately made her brain heat up, and a dull pain rose in her chest. She grabbed her neck in a panic and sure enough she grabbed an arm. Then she followed the arm forward, but only touched a shoulder. Lu Chongfeng and the other two people were also shocked by Lu Ting's sudden appearance. They looked at Lu Ting's painful expression as if she was being strangled by something, but they couldn't see what was doing it to her. They were all stunned and forgot to react for a moment, until they saw a figure appear in front of Lu Ting. Woman, I can see that you are very ambitious this morning, but your courage is bigger than your ambition. A hoarse voice sounded. Lu Ting looked at Lin Xiao who appeared in front of her in horror. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she couldn't say anything. Her face was also a little green. Kacha! There was a sound of metal. When Lu Chongfeng and the two people next to him recovered, they immediately raised their guns at Lin Xiao. Stop! Let her go! Lin Xiao turned her head and looked at them. Her eyes couldn't be seen through the sunglasses in the dark, but the corner of her mouth was tightly curled. Originally I wanted to let her live, but since you guys pointed your guns at me, it seems that you don't want her life anymore. Looks like you don't want her life anymore. Her voice was hoarse and low to begin with, and it sounded even more sinister in the dark night. At the same time, Lin Xiao slightly tightened her grip on Lu Ting's neck. Lu Ting was like a fish on the shore. She opened her mouth wide and breathed hard, but she couldn't take in any air. The feeling of suffocation made her chest feel like it was about to explode. Her eyes were wide open, as if they were about to pop out. Lu Chongfeng was stunned again. His hand that was holding the gun was shaking. At this time Lin Xiao suddenly moved. She took a step back and let go of Lu Ting. Lu Ting slid to the ground like a piece of rag. She covered her neck with both hands and breathed hard. Cough, cough, cough. She sat on the ground and painfully coughed. Lin Xiao looked at her and said, I don't like to kill people for no reason, and I won't kill people randomly. Seeing that you guys only wanted to steal, I will let you live. Get out. As she spoke, she turned around and walked into the club. Lu Chongfeng quickly put away his gun and ran to Lu Ting's side. Lu Ting, how are you? Are you okay? After Lu Ting breathed in, the pain in her chest still hadn't disappeared, but at least she felt a little better. She raised her head and stared at Lin Xiao's back with an ugly expression. Her eyes were full of hatred and murderous intent. When Lu Chongfeng got close, she suddenly grabbed Lu Chongfeng's gun and shot at Lin Xiao. Lu Ting. Stop! Lu Chongfeng was startled by her, and when he came back to his senses by the time he reacted, Lu Ting had already fired. However, Lin Xiao suddenly backhanded and grabbed the gun when she fired. Then she turned around and opened her palm. A few bullets were lying quietly in her palm. Ding ding ding, Lin Xiao threw the bullets to the ground. Lu Ting and the others widened their eyes. Although she couldn't see the bullets in Lin Xiao's palm, she could still hear the sound of the bullets falling to the ground. You're courting death. Since you're courting death, I will fulfill your wish, Lin Xiao said calmly. Then she suddenly flicked her finger at Lu Ting. Puff, there was a light sound of wind. Then Lu Ting fell to the ground with a frozen expression. Lu Chongfeng looked down and saw that Lu Ting wasn't moving. He hurriedly squatted down and ran to her. Lu Ting? Lu Ting? Lu Ting? When he picked her up, he found that blood was slowly seeping out of Lu Ting's forehead. Then half of her head slowly slid down, revealing her red and white brain. Lin Xiao was less than 2 meters away from Lu Ting, so she only flicked her claw and directly cut Lu Ting's skull. I said that I don't like to kill people, but it doesn't mean that I can let others kill me, Lin Xiao said calmly to Lu Chongfeng. Chapter 298. The current Lin Xiao was not that afraid of rank 6 metahumans anymore, so she was not worried that Lu Chongfeng, a rank 6 water metahuman, would attack her. Because when she was in the space, Little Man had indeed helped her increase her strength again. From the pair of green eyes behind her sunglasses, It could be seen that she was now a rank 5 zombie leader. However, she didn't know how strong her overall strength was. At least she would not be weaker than an ordinary rank 6 zombie king. Then when facing a rank 6 metahuman, she would be able to face them calmly. Unlike in the morning, when she needed to drag the rank 6 metahumans into the space to weaken them before she could make a move. Lin Xiao turned around again and walked into the floor. At this moment, a white shadow suddenly flashed down. It flashed past Lu Changfeng and the others, and then the three men suddenly fell to the ground. Puff! Puff! Hearing the sound behind her, Lin Xiao turned around. She saw Qiu Lily standing at the side looking at her. Do you want to let these 3 people go? Letting them go will only bring us trouble in the future. Lin Xiao looked at her, shook her head and said with a smile, I was waiting for you to make a move. Even if I really fought with him, I might be able to beat him, but it would be a bit more troublesome. So it was easy to let you do it. Qiu Lily looked at her, and then thought of something. So you were waiting for me to be your fighter? Lin Xiao looked at the men who were knocked out by Qiu Lily, and said, yeah. Suddenly she walked over, and then squatted beside Lu Ting. She used her finger to dig into her smooth head, and then dug out a crystal core. The rank 4 crystal core emitted a faint blue light in the night. She did not understand why Chun Yuding and Lu Changfeng kept chasing the robbers, knowing that they might not be a match for the robbers. Were they also like moths to a flame? Just now she heard Lu Ting call Lu Changfeng brother. So the two of them were brother and sister. But when she was next to the other members of the Wind Court, she always felt that they had a different view of her. They seemed to feel that she was very important, but the important thing was not this person, but something about her. But Lin Xiao had observed Lu Ting, and there was nothing worth paying attention to. That meant she could only rely on her ability. Moreover, Lu Ting did not use her special ability. In other words, the people in the team actually cared about her ability. What kind of ability did people care about the most? If it wasn't the water element, then it was the space element. Lin Xiao took out her core crystal, thinking that it was possible that this woman was also a water type, because Chun Yuding and the others said that they only wanted to exchange food and weapons with her, and they even wanted to exchange for water. Also, Lu Changfeng was also a water elemental. Could it be that these two siblings had the same special ability? When the crystal core turned into energy from her hand and entered her body, she knew she was wrong. Because this wasn't a water element, it was a space element. Sensing the changes in his space, Lin Xiao was speechless. Why were spatial ability users as cheap as cabbages now? She had met 2 in just one day. She looked at Lu Changfeng and the other 2 who had fainted and raised her head to ask Qiu Lily, why didn't you just kill them? What the hell do you mean by knocking him out? Qiu Lily turned around and said, Humph, I won't kill people for no reason. Hearing her say that, Lin Xiao had no choice but to wave her claws at the 3. Puff puff. There was a slight sound of air being cut, and the sound of flesh and bones being cut open. If it was before the apocalypse, of course she wouldn't casually kill people, because killing people was against the law. But now, killing people was not against the law. Whoever was the strongest would be the boss, and that was the law. The apocalypse was so chaotic in order to survive. The law already existed in name only. Of course, there were still rules in the base. Otherwise, if there were too many people, they wouldn't be able to manage it. So a country had its laws and a family had its rules. There were also mandatory rules in the base. Outside the base, there were no more rules. So if you died outside, no one would care. If you wanted to take revenge, you could, but you couldn't kill people inside the base. Outside the base, you could kill them however you wanted. If they died, you could save some food. If these people didn't want to kill Lin Xiao, then she wouldn't have killed them. However, they wanted to kill her. So Lin Xiao wouldn't leave them alive to become a disaster in the future. Ungrateful people wouldn't thank others for saving them. They would only remember what others did to them, and then think of ways to take revenge. Qiu Lily took out the crystals of Lu Changfeng and the other 2 people, and then wiped them on the bodies. Then she put them into her small bag. Lin Xiao turned around and went into the club. When she arrived at the bar and restaurant, she saw a group of people lying on the ground, motionless on the table. At this time, Lin Feng was sitting on the bar counter, like a drunkard who just woke up. He supported his forehead with his hand, but his eyes couldn't open. Lin Xiao glanced at him, and then looked at the figures of Mrs. Lin and the others. She found that they were all lying on the sofa, looking like they had fallen asleep. Lin Xiaolu was lying on Cheng Wangshua's lap. Looking back at Lin Feng, Lin Xiao picked up a cup on the table, and then the cup disappeared for 2 seconds, and then appeared in her hand, filled with water. Lin Xiao squatted in front of Lin Xiaolu, helped her up, and slowly fed her a cup of water. Then she continued to feed Mrs. Lin, Lin Wenwen and Cheng Wangxue. After that, she walked to the bar counter on Lin Feng's side. Then she also gave him a cup of water. She could feel that there was a strange energy in these people which didn't belong to them. It should be what Lu Ting said before, that Lu used some special ability on these people that made them fall into a coma. Lin Xiao didn't know how they used it, but so many people fell asleep. After Lin Xiao let them drink her water, the strange energy slowly disappeared. What happened? Mrs. Lin Luoran, and Lin Luoran see that everyone is lying on the ground, leaning on the table and sleeping on the chair. They were all confused and surprised. Lin Xiao said, "When I wasn't here, you were all plotted against. If I came out a bit later, we would have lost a car tonight." Although she definitely had the ability to get it back in the end. What happened? Lin Feng also looked at her in confusion. Lin Xiao said, "Lu Ting wanted to steal the car I gave you today when you were all asleep. But I've already killed him." "What? You killed them?" Lin Feng and the others looked at her in surprise. There was no blame in their tone, but they were surprised that Lin Xiao would kill them. Lin Xiao spread out her hands and said, "I didn't do it first. I never show mercy to those who shoot at me." Lin Feng nodded, "Okay." Chapter 299. After using Lin Xiao's lake water to wake the others up, Chen Yuding knew what Lu Ting and Lu Changfeng had done and was very angry. "That woman has always been selfish. But I didn't think she would covet your car." Lin Xiao sat on the side and didn't say anything. She just held a glass of water and drank. "She even left us behind. She wanted you to know what happened to the car after they stole it. Then she would vent her anger on us?" One of Chen Yuding's companions said angrily. Lin Feng nodded and said, "If they really succeeded in stealing the car, we definitely wouldn't let you go." Chen Yuding and the others didn't say anything. Lin Xiao stood up and walked past them. Then she said, "Actually, I knew this morning that she didn't really believe what I said. Later when she saw the car, she still didn't believe me. So I already noticed her along the way." Then she walked back to the bar and looked at the time. It was 2 in the morning. Forget it. Anyway, they have been taken care of by me. At least he could sleep peacefully. You guys quickly find a place to rest and continue the journey tomorrow morning. She didn't need to worry about Chen Yuding and the Lu siblings having evil thoughts because she had just walked around. Apart from being shocked by what Lu Ting and Lu Changfeng had done, these people didn't have any other thoughts. Of course, Lin Feng and the others knew that Lin Xiao wouldn't let these people do anything bad, so they were relieved. However, he was still a little afraid of losing consciousness due to some kind of strange ability. At dawn, Lin Feng and the others got up and made some simple breakfast. It was still a pot of meat porridge. There was no air in Lin Wenwen's space, it was a vacuum zone. It was very useful for keeping food fresh, but she couldn't bring people in. When Lin Xiao entered the space and saw the things in the third subspace, she knew why Chen Yuding and the others cared so much about her. Although Chen Yuding and the others didn't show it on their faces, their eyes often stared at Lu Ting intentionally or unintentionally. And when they heard Lin Xiao say that she killed Lu Ting, their hearts also fluctuated a lot. But they didn't say anything. Lu Ting's space was actually filled with a few barrels of gasoline. There was a huge shortage of gasoline in the apocalypse, no wonder they cared so much about her. Lin Xiao himself had only used 1 barrel of oil, and there were still 2 or 3 barrels that had not been opened. Now that he had a few more barrels, he had unexpectedly made a fortune. She found that other than the first subspace, which could hold people before entering her, the other 2 subspaces could not. But after she took it in, it was connected. Therefore, they were all filled with air. Lin Xiao took a look inside Lu Ting's space. Other than a few barrels of oil, there were also a few female products. There was nothing else. Moreover, this space was very small, even smaller than Space 1. It was only slightly bigger than a washroom. Therefore, after filling a few barrels of oil, the tank was already full. Lin Xiao walked out and was about to leave. Suddenly, a ball of furry stuff leaned over. She looked down and saw that it was a gray rabbit. The gray rabbit has grown a lot in her space, and it has become fatter, eating the grass in her space, eating her strawberries and eating her vegetables. It would be a wonder if he wasn't fat. However, this fellow rarely took the initiative to approach her. Every time Xiao Budian carried it out, it would run back. Lin Xiao bent down to pick it up and asked, "What's wrong? You came to find me, don't tell me you miss Xiao Budian." Speaking of Xiao Budian, she did not know if anyone had noticed the current situation on her side. That Yang Chao was really not a good person. She had no opinion on dealing with Wu Changyue, but starting with Xiao Budian, Lin Xiao felt that this man was not a good person. Moreover, from the way he indulged Lu Qianyu to provoke Wu Changyue, it could be seen that this man liked to use some despicable means. On the other side, in the civilian area outside Sea City Base in a room, the bandit boss who had escaped from Lin Xiao's side said coldly to another man in the room with a gloomy face, "What your leader said is false. What asking us to deal with the relatives of the leader of Hades King Base? What dealing with Yuan Tianqing? He is simply lying to us. I made me lose 11 brothers. Go back and tell your leader to prepare to pay with his life." Although the other man was only a rank 6 ability user, he was not afraid of the rank 7 bandit boss at all. He said with a faint smile, "Tang He, don't get too excited. We didn't expect that we would make you lose all your brothers. After all, our leader believed in your strength, that's why he cooperated with you, right? Besides, there's nothing for us to gain by tricking you, right?" The boss of the robbers, who was also the Tang He that the robbers were talking about, suppressed the air pressure around him. There was a trace of hostility in his voice. "If you're not lying to us, why didn't you tell me that there was a rank 6 zombie king there? And it's a space type. If I had known in advance, I wouldn't have let it kill my brothers." The other party shook his head and said, "We really didn't know about this. Moreover, the zombie king has always been elusive, and it's very difficult to encounter one. Besides, you're a rank 7 ability user. Even if you encounter a rank 6 zombie king, you can still kill it, can't you?" Tang He looked at the other party and was silent for a few seconds before saying, "The other party is a space ability user and can enter space at any time. Let your leader try and see if he can kill a zombie king that can disappear in front of you at any time. Moreover, there's more than just a zombie king there." The powerful pressure he felt at that time, if he guessed correctly, it should be a rank 2 king. If that's the case, he should let someone go and scout it out first. The energy of a rank 2 king's zombie core is enormous. It's enough to let a rank 7 ability user break through to rank 8 without any suspense. But at the same time, the danger of a rank 2 king is also extremely high. When a rank 1 king is angry, the zombie tide that he can cause can exceed 5,000 to 6,000 zombies. But no one knows about a zombie tide caused by a rank 2 king. But if you think about it, you should be able to guess that there's at least 10,000 to 20,000 zombies. If the leaders of the major bases know that there's a rank 2 king in that area, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. The other party obviously didn't hear the main point of Tang He's words, and only heard about the space-type zombies. However, it's rare to encounter space-type zombies. If you bring this zombie core back, you might be able to exchange it for something better. The other party looked at Tang He and said with his eyes slightly lit up. Tang He coldly snorted and said, "Humph, if you have the ability to kill it in one fell swoop, otherwise it won't be able to come out after entering space. What can you do?" Chapter 300. When Tang He met up with Yang Chao's people, Yuan Tianqing's people also came early in the morning. Du Yuanxing, who went to open the door after hearing the knock, looked at the beauty standing at the door with a blank expression. Deputy Leader Yan. So early in the morning. Good morning." Du Yuanxing, who suddenly didn't know what to say, felt a little overwhelmed. Yan Fengyu smiled elegantly at him and said, "What's wrong? Aren't you going to invite me in? Your deputy leader is up, right? I'm really sorry to disturb your sweet dreams so early in the morning." No, it's not a disturbance. Not a disturbance. I do have to trouble you to wait for a while. I don't want to see something unsightly when I come in." Du Yuanxing immediately shook his head in a panic, then seemed to remember something and blocked the door to stop her from entering. After speaking to her, Du Yuanqing turned around and shouted at the people who were still naked or only wearing a pair of underwear, "Hey, you guys, move faster. Put on your clothes. It's so rude to let a beauty wait." The others had just woken up and were holding toothbrushes and hanging towels as they walked by. When they heard the door open, they were all stunned for a moment and looked at the side of the door with sleepy faces. But when they heard Du Yuanqing call Deputy Leader Yan, they immediately woke up. So when Du Yuanqing turned around and shouted for them, these people were still swaying to find their clothes to wear. Yuan Tianqing, who was wearing a white t-shirt, subconsciously looked down at himself after hearing his shout. He didn't find anything wrong, so he went to brush his teeth. After a few minutes, Du Yuanqing opened the door and let Yan Fengyu in. "Sorry to make you wait for so long, please come in." The faint smile on Yan Fengyu's face didn't change. She walked in with her exquisite high heels swaying her waist. "Please sit." Yuan Tianqing sat on one of the two single sofas in the room. He gestured to the other sofa with his hand and poured her a glass of water. Of course, Yan Fengyu didn't come empty-handed. She carried a bag in her hand. After putting the bag down, she sat down. "This is the breakfast I brought for you. I made it myself. Come and try it." As she spoke, she opened the bag, and a mixture of egg and scallions wafted out. Yuan Tianqing smiled politely and said, "Next time you don't have to bring anything. That will make us feel bad." Looking at the bag that Yan Fengyu opened, there were pieces of rolled-up onion omelets that were still steaming hot. Everyone who had just woken up and had not eaten breakfast could not help but swallow their saliva. "Come and eat, I made a lot. I'm just afraid that you won't have enough to eat," Yan Fengyu said to them with a smile. Du Yuanqing, Linyu, Lu Junjie, and the others were drooling as they looked at the omelet, but they didn't dare to touch it. In the end, he tore off the omelet reluctantly and shifted his gaze to Yuan Tianqing beside him. Yuan Tianqing took 2 whiffs of the fragrance and didn't stand on ceremony. He said to the others, "Go get some bowls and chopsticks. You can eat it yourself." Once everyone received the order, they immediately rushed into the kitchen and took out their bowls and chopsticks. Then they squeezed to the front of the table and took 2 pieces each. Yan Fengyu's omelet was very big, but it was not enough for a grown man to eat. Therefore, they all took 2 pieces and retreated to the side, away from Yan Fengyu and Yuan Tianqing, and found a quiet corner to eat. In fact, they directly left the room and squatted outside the door. "This great beauty Yan seems to be really interested in our boss. She even brought breakfast so early in the morning." Du Yuanqing took a bite of the fragrant, soft, and refreshing omelet and said happily as he chewed, "Even a blind person can see that," Lin Yu said. "It's a pity that our boss doesn't like her," Lu Junjie said with a look of pity. "But why did she come so early in the morning? Who knows? She's a deputy leader after all. She's actually quite busy with work. If she didn't have anything to do, she wouldn't have the time to come personally." That's true. The few people squatted outside the room and ate as they chatted. Only Yuan Tianqing took 2 bites of the 2 people in the room. "Tell me you didn't come early just to treat me to breakfast, right?" Yuan Tianqing smiled and looked at Yan Fengyu. The smile on Yan Fengyu's face faded at this moment. She looked at him seriously and said, "I received a piece of news about you, Leader Wu, and the surviving relatives of the former Netherworld King's base and the leader of Nether Flame." Hearing her words, Yuan Tianqing's face also became indifferent. "What news? And it's targeting so many of us?" Yan Fengyu said, "Yang Chao. He has always been at odds with Leader Wu, so anyone who has worked with Leader Wu will often be targeted by Yang Chao. So this time he has his eyes on you. He seems to have found some information about your relationship with the surviving relatives of the leader of Nether Flame. He is now preparing to ambush you when you leave the base, and he has already sent people to deal with your companions outside the base." Yuan Tianqing's expression turned slightly cold, and he said, "Is what you said true?" Yan Fengyu nodded and said, "The news is true. Of course, it's up to you whether you believe it or not. You can also go and verify it with Leader Wu. I think he should have received the news too." Yuan Tianqing suddenly stood up, looked at her and said, "Then you mean that there are already people outside preparing to deal with Lin Feng and the others?" Yan Fengyu looked up at him. "That's right." Yuan Tianqing clenched his right fist and punched his left palm. He said anxiously, "Bad news. Isn't Lin Feng and the others in danger now?" Yan Fengyu said, That's why I came to tell you this early in the morning. It's up to you what to do. Yuan Tianqing looked at her gratefully and said, "Thank you. I got it. I'll return this favor in the future." Seeing that he was indeed a little anxious, Yan Fengyu also stood up. "Then I'll leave first. If you want to think of a way to save them, you need to hurry." Saying that, she walked to the door. Yuan Tianqing nodded at her and said, "I got it." Yan Fengyu raised a charming smile at him, then walked to the door and reached out to open it. The 5 people squatting on the ground on both sides of the door turned to look at her at the same time. Then they immediately stood up in the next second. "Ahem. Deputy Leader Yan, are you leaving?" "Thank you. The breakfast was delicious." Yan Fengyu said with a smile, "My cooking isn't good. This is the only thing I can bring out. As long as you guys like it. I'll leave first. See you next time." Saying that, she walked out. As she walked, she looked back at them with a smile and waved. The beautiful woman looked back and smiled, so the people at the door stared blankly at her back as she walked away. After a few seconds, when Yan Fengyu's beautiful back entered the elevator, they came back to their senses. Only then did they come back to their senses. When they turned around, they saw Yuan Tianqing staring at them calmly. Yuan Tianqing said, "Have you seen enough? Wipe your saliva." Everyone subconsciously wiped their mouths. Oh. Chapter 301. 10 minutes later, Yuan Tianqing took Du Yuanqing and Lin Yu to Wu Chengyue's residence. At Wu Chengyue's home, Meng Yu and Emoli were in Lingling's room. Wu Chengyue, Xiao Yunlong and the Dr. Big Tree were sitting in the hall. The 3 of them looked worried. Suddenly Xiao Liqing ran in. "Leader, Deputy Leader Yuan is here." Wu Chengyue looked up and immediately responded, "Invite him in." Xiao Liqing ran out. A few seconds later, he saw Yuan Tianqing walk in alone. Wu Chengyue and the others stood up. Xiao Yunlong gave up his single sofa and gestured to Yuan Tianqing, "Please sit down." Then he moved a chair to the side and sat down. Yuan Tianqing sat down and looked at the depressed expressions of the others and asked with concern, "Is Lingling's condition still not better?" The 3 shook their heads. Ever since she drank the water given by Yuan Tianqing, Lingling's condition had stopped there. It was neither up nor down and she was still in a semi-conscious state. But after her body temperature dropped to 50 degrees, it stopped fluctuating. No matter how much she drank later, it didn't have any effect. So now Lingling's condition had stopped there. Liang Dashu thought of many ways, but it was useless. After Meng Yu woke up in the hospital, she immediately came back. She recovered very quickly because she felt very guilty about Lingling being kidnapped by level 6 zombies. She had been taking care of Lingling since she came back. Yuan Tianqing was also very worried and said, "If this goes on, I don't know what the result will be." His words made the expressions of the other 3 people sink. Wu Chengyue quickly adjusted his expression and then asked Yuan Tianqing, "By the way, why did you suddenly come here?" Yuan Tianqing asked, "There's something I want to confirm with you. I don't know if you've heard, but your base's leader Yang seems to be secretly attacking my companions outside the base." Wu Chengyue's expression immediately became dignified when he heard this. He said, "Oh yes, I've only just heard about this. In fact, seeing you come now, I also guessed that you should be here for this matter. I heard that Yang Chao secretly hooked up with a group of robbers outside. They seem to have made some kind of deal. Now those robbers have been heading in the direction you came from for a few days." Xiao Yunlong said, "I was about to send someone to inform you. I didn't expect you to get the news first." Yuan Tianqing asked anxiously, "Then is this news true? Wouldn't Lin Feng and the others be in danger? Moreover, the other leaders of your base actually colluded with the robbers outside. Do you have any opinion on this matter?" Xiao Yunlong turned to look at Wu Chengyue. Wu Chengyue said, "We are currently trying our best to collect evidence about him. Without conclusive evidence, we can't do anything to him even if we have an opinion." Yuan Tianqing looked at him speechlessly. He had no way to refute what the other party said. He nodded and said, "Well, since you've confirmed that the information is true, I think I should go out of the base first. Sorry to disturb you." With that, he stood up and prepared to leave. Wu Chengyue and the rest also stood up. Wu Chengyue waved to him. "Wait a moment, let Yunlong go with you. I heard that the robbers Yang Chao is looking for are not ordinary robbers. There are estimated to be more than 2 level 6 ability users. You definitely can't deal with them alone. As he spoke, he looked at Xiao Yunlong, who nodded. Yuan Tianxing looked at Wu Chengyue with some surprise. He didn't expect him to let Xiao Yunlong go back with him. Wu Chengyue saw his expression and said with a smile, "Don't look at me like that. Because of your help, Lingling's situation is not so bad now. It's just that I can't leave Lingling's side now. Otherwise I can go with you to find Lin Feng and the others. So I can only let Xiao Yunlong do it for me." Yuan Tianxing nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Xiao Yunlong said at this time, "What are you thanking me for? You don't have to be so polite, you also helped us. Helping each other is what we should do. We are not ungrateful people." Yuan Tianxing nodded and said to Wu Chengyue, "Then we'll leave first, see you next time." Wu Chengyue sent him to the door. "If there is any accident, remember to send someone back to inform me." Yuan Tianxing, "Okay. Thank you." After watching Yuan Tianxing and Xiao Yunlong go out, Liang Dashu said, "I don't know what Yang Chao is going to do to you this time. Aren't you going to fight back?" Wu Qingyue's expression turned cold. "When Lingling's matter is over, I will fight back. Does he really think I don't know anything? Humph." He knew a lot of Yang Chao's little tricks, but because it didn't have much effect on him, so he didn't pay attention to him and watched him as if he was a clown. The most important thing now was Lingling's matter. He would prepare to deal with Yang Chao's matter later. Liang Dashu said, "His actions are becoming more and more obvious and rampant, and he must know about Lingling's situation now. He probably wants to take advantage of Lingling's situation to come and make trouble. You have to be careful." Wu Chengyue's expression was cold, the elegance just now completely gone. "If he dares to lay a hand on Lingling, I will kill him." When he said the word kill, there was an oppressive murderous aura that flashed across his body. Liang Dashu looked at him and didn't say anything more. However, whether it was Yuan Tianxing, Wu Chengyue, or Yang Chao's side, they didn't know that Lin Feng and the others in Lin Chao were almost at their Sea City base. Therefore, 2 hours later, when Lin Feng and the others entered Sea City base, they received news that Yuan Tianxing and the others had run out of Sea City. Moreover, they were looking for them. After coming out of the registration office, Lin Feng and the others were a little dumbfounded. "So they missed us?" Cheng Wangxue said with a speechless expression. Lin Feng nodded and held his forehead helplessly. They came all the way to find Yuan Tianxing, but in the end Yuan Tianxing ran out. Moreover, both sides had missed each other. They didn't bump into each other and directly missed each other. Lin Xiao stood at the side and said, "There's no need to worry about this, I can bring some people out to find them. You guys find a place to stay in this base first. And at the same time, find out how much Yuan Tianxing is doing here. Don't ask how she entered the base and passed those detectors because she directly entered while invisible. No one noticed her at all, and she didn't need to do any registration. Therefore, the people in the base didn't know Lin Xiao was there. And when Tang He the robber came in, at least Yang Chao's people disguised him and covered him up." Hearing her words, Lin Feng felt inexplicably relieved. He said, "That's the only way. You guys are more suitable than us to find people." Chen Yuding, who had brought them into the base to do the registration, said, "They shouldn't have gone far. It's more likely that we can find them now." Because it was Lin Feng and the others' first time entering the base, Chen Yuding and the others played the role of a host. They brought them to a place to register and find a place to apply for temporary accommodation. Chapter 302. Lin Xiao said to Chen Yuding, "Then please take them to a place to live. I'll find you when I come back." Chen Yuding nodded to her. Lin Xiao turned to Lin Feng and said, "You don't have to arrange a place for me to live, I don't need it. Pay attention to your own safety in the base, especially the girls. When I came in, I felt a lot of malicious eyes staring at us." She looked around. Because as a woman, in the base where 90% of the population was male and 10% female, young and beautiful women would always attract attention, especially strange faces. Lin Wenwen and Cheng Wangxue were both good-looking. Although Long Qingying's facial features were not as delicate as them, her skin and temperament were very good. Even Mrs. Lin was a little older, but she still had her charm. There was no guarantee that some wretched people wouldn't stare at the older Mrs. Lin. Lin Feng and the others immediately turned to look around and found that there were some people secretly staring at them. Long Qingying's originally cold temperament suddenly dropped a few degrees. She raised her hand to hold the katana on her back and glanced around with murderous eyes. Immediately, half of those people's gazes retracted. Lin Feng withdrew his gaze and nodded to Lin Xiao, "I know." After separating from them, Lin Xiao immediately walked to a public bathroom. Then in a flash, he entered a state of invisibility and silently walked out again. However, when she was halfway to the gate of the base, little man's voice suddenly came from the space. "Mama, mama, mama, mama." Little man's voice sounded very anxious. Lin Xiao's footsteps came to a halt, and then he flashed into the space. As soon as she came in, she saw little man waving countless vines in the lake, stirring up the whole lake. Lu Jun and Chou Lily were just sitting on the sofa, curiously looking at little man who suddenly made a fuss in the lake. And in the 3 spaces on the side, there were zombies number 1 to number 7 hiding. And Meng Meng hid in the small space of number 3 alone. The 8 zombies only stuck their heads out of the door, looking at little man in the lake with some horror. Because Chou Lily complained about the dust on the road, she immediately asked to stay in the space. As a result, Meng Meng immediately pestered Lin Xiao. This time she did not want Lin Xiao to let Chou Lily out. Instead, she wanted her to go in as well. Lin Xiao asked for Chou Lily's opinion and saw that she had no objections. Even Meng Meng was taken in. As a result, when he came in, he was also frightened by the little vine in the lake. Although little man didn't appear, little man's aura still made her a little nervous. Now that little man had appeared, Dreamy immediately rushed into the last space and refused to come out. "What's wrong?" Lin Xiao appeared by the lake and asked little man, who had suddenly become excited for some unknown reason. Little man immediately stretched out a vine in front of her, then wrapped it around her hand and said, "Mama, mama, mama, take me to see Tiny Tot." Little man feels her. "She is not in a good condition now, mama, bring her in quickly." Lin Xiao looked at her jade-white tentacles in surprise. "How can you feel Tiny Tot outside?" Little man said, "The energy in Tiny Tot's body is about to explode. Because it is close, little man can feel it. Mama, bring Tiny Tot in quickly. Although her current situation is suppressed by little man's energy, it will be a great burden to her body if it lasts for a long time." As she spoke, little man eagerly shook the vines in the lake. Seeing little man's anxious look, Lin Xiao had to agree with her. "Okay, I'll go and find her home first." Anyway, even if she went out to chase Lin Feng, she was not in a hurry. Moreover, Tiny Tot's situation seemed to be very critical. She also wanted to see what was going on first. Little man immediately became happy. "Mama, hurry up." After coming out of the space, Lin Xiao continued to be invisible. Then she looked left and right, found the tallest building nearby, and quickly climbed up. When she reached the top of the building, she stretched out her nose and sniffed around. Soon, she smelled the scent of Tiny Tot and Wu Chengyue, then turned around and jumped in the direction of Wu Chengyue's home. The distance from the outer area to the inner area was less than 2 kilometers, and Lin Xiao quickly entered the inner area. Then as she walked, she found that the place where Wu Chengyue lived was not in a high-end villa or a high-end apartment. Instead, he lived in a small building in an ordinary civilian area. Lin Xiao landed on the roof of Wu Chengyue's home, and then she felt that there were several level 5 paranormals guarding around Wu Chengyue's small building. In addition to Wu Chengyue, Tiny Tot, Meng Yu, and 2 strangers in the house. As she got closer, she also felt the chaotic energy in Tiny Tot's body. This familiar feeling was like the situation last time when the energy in Little Lu's body exploded. Was Tiny Tot going to awaken? No way. Tiny Tot was younger than Little Lu. How could she endure the awakening at this time? However, the energy in Tiny Tot's body felt a little familiar, as if it was the same as the energy in the lake in her space. But there seemed to be something else. Moreover, Tiny Tot's restless energy seemed to be suppressed by a familiar energy. Wasn't the energy that was suppressing Tiny Tot's energy from her lake? This was something she was familiar with. After noticing Tiny Tot's situation, Lin Xiao directly jumped from the roof to the balcony of the 3rd floor. Then she walked in from the door of the room on the balcony, passed through the study, and walked to the corridor of the 3rd floor. Lingling's room was on the 3rd floor, but there were 2 people in her room. Lin Xiao looked around and then walked to the door of Tiny Tot's room. The door was open, and she saw that in addition to Mengyu, there was another woman in the room. Lin Xiao gently walked in and then walked to the side of Tiny Tot's bed. Looking at Tiny Tot covered with a thin layer of quilt, and his hands and feet were exposed. Her eyes were half closed, but her eyes were unfocused. On the bedside was a familiar-looking grass dragonfly. She made it up. She didn't expect this child to keep the grass dragonfly with him. Lin Xiao thought about it. She couldn't explain anything to Wu Changwei now. But she couldn't just directly steal Tiny Tot cough, quietly take him away. Her eyes turned and suddenly flashed into space. Then she found a piece of paper and wrote a sentence on it. Qiu Lily and the other zombies saw her suddenly appear again, and then find a piece of paper on the desk to write something, and then disappeared again. After Lin Xiao came out, she stood by the bed. She reached out and gently grabbed Tiny Tot's little hand, and then with a flash disappeared. Then a piece of paper floated to the empty bed. The moment Tiny Tot disappeared, Mengyu and Emoli suddenly turned their heads and looked at the bed at the same time. As a result, they saw that Tiny Tot, who was originally lying on the bed, had disappeared. Chapter 303. Lingling. Where's Lingling? Mengyu jumped up and rushed to the bed. Looking at the empty bed, Emoli's expressionless face was also dumbfounded. Mengyu looked at the piece of paper on the bed and picked it up. It wrote, "I'll take care of Lingling's situation. I don't have time to explain it to you now. Please wait for me to come back. Lin." A few seconds later, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard coming from outside the room. Then Wu Changwei appeared at the door. What happened to Lingling? Why did her aura suddenly disappear? Then, he looked at the empty bed and his eyes widened. His handsome face immediately turned ferocious. "Where's Lingling?" Mengyu turned around and raised the piece of paper in her hand. "I don't know what happened either." Lingling suddenly disappeared, but a piece of paper appeared. Wu Changwei hurried in and took the piece of paper from her hand. After seeing the words, he forced himself to calm down and analyze the words on the piece of paper. What does it mean? Who wants to take Lingling away? Lin. Who is Lin? Liang Dashu walked over and looked at the words on the piece of paper. He comforted him. Calm down first. Maybe the other party doesn't have any bad intentions. Wu Changwei held the piece of paper tightly and closed his eyes. Then he stared at the words on the piece of paper and said, "It must be Yang Chao. Not many people know about Lingling's situation. He said he would take care of Lingling's situation. Does he think I'm stupid? Would I believe him?" The air pressure around him became unstable and waves of murderous intent leaked out. Liang Dashu said calmly, "Calm down first. First, who is this Lin? Find out first and then make a judgment. Of course you can start with Yang Chao. Second, the other party doesn't seem to have any bad intentions and didn't threaten you. He also said to wait for him to come back. This means that he will come back to find you." At this point, he paused and turned to Emoli and Mengyu. "Did you two feel anything when Lingling disappeared? Calm down and think about it." Hearing Liang Dashu's words, Mengyu and Emoli looked at each other. Mengyu forced herself to calm down and think about the situation just now. Because for a moment, she felt an aura appear and then quickly disappear. When she looked up, Lingling was nowhere to be seen. The other party only appeared for a moment before disappearing. I think it should be a spatial ability. If the other party's ability is to turn invisible, it's impossible for him to pick up Lingling in an instant without us noticing anything. Emoli said, "I didn't sense any malicious thoughts or emotions, but I felt a trace of anxiety and confusion. I had a feeling that the person who came here knew about Lingling's current situation. Before he came, he probably didn't know much about it. As for why you're so anxious, I think you should think about it, leader. Who else would treat Lingling well? Maybe we should look on the bright side." Seeing Emoli finish her words coldly, Wu Changwei calmed down a little. He looked at the words in his hand and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Lin. Moreover, there was a space arcanist. Hey, didn't he meet such a person before returning to the base? Wu Changwei immediately remembered the person who snatched his zombie king's corpse core in the Shihu district of Hangzhou. In the end, he fought with the other party, but he lost. Although he bit the other party at that time. That woman? She can turn invisible and also has a spatial ability. Could it be her? Wu Changyue suddenly said. I'm going to find someone. After saying that, he quickly walked out of the door. He was going to find that Lu Qianni and ask him if he knew anything. The others saw him suddenly turn around and immediately followed him out. On the other side, Lin Xiao grabbed Tiny Tot as she flashed into the spatial ability and quickly hugged her. She looked down at Tiny Tot's half-closed eyes and softly called out, Tiny Tot. But Tiny Tot didn't have any reaction. Lin Xiao thought for a moment and suddenly squatted down on one knee. She put Tiny Tot's body on her lap and held him with one hand. Then she used her other hand to take off the hat and sunglasses on her head. She looked at Tiny Tot with a pair of dark green eyes and shouted again, Tiny Tot? Do you recognize me? Miraculously, Tiny Tot's eyes changed a little this time. But it only flashed slightly and then returned to the original situation. Lin Xiao could only carry her and walk to the lake. She said to Little Man, Tiny Tot is about to awaken his ability. What do you think? Little Man waved a few thick vines and came over. 3 of them separated and gently wrapped around Tiny Tot's body. Another one touched Lin Xiao. Mama, don't worry, Little Man will successfully awaken Tiny Tot. Lin Xiao nodded and then let Little Man take Tiny Tot into the lake. Lu Jun and Qiu Lily both came to Lin Xiao's side. Neither of them knew Tiny Tot. They curiously asked, Is this the Tiny Tot you just told Little Man about? Whose child is it? What's wrong? Lin Xiao said, It's the little princess of Haiqing Base. I don't know why she suddenly awakened her ability. Lu Jun asked, Little princess? Is it the leader's daughter? Do you and Little Man know her? She knew that Lin Xiao wouldn't bring the little princess of the basin for no reason, and let Little Man help her. And it was even more impossible for Little Man to have any reaction to people from the outside world. Lin Xiao nodded. Yes, before I met you. Speaking of which, it was this body's fault. Lu Jun and Qiu Lily looked at her curiously. But Lin Xiao didn't say much to them. She just said, Oh, I'll tell you when I have time. I have to go out of the base to get Yuan Tianxing back first. Lu Jun and Qiu Lily looked at her even more strangely. Huh? That Yuan Tianxing isn't in Haiqing Base? Where did he go? Lin Xiao shook her head. He's not there. After checking the entry and exit records, I found that they left the base 2 hours ago. I need to go find them now. Lu Jun and Qiu Lily looked at each other and suddenly didn't know what to say. Lin Xiao watched Tiny Tot being brought into the lake by Little Man. She was a little worried. Fortunately, Little Man had helped Lin Xiaolu awaken once last time, so there shouldn't be any problems this time. Knowing that she couldn't help here, Lin Xiao could only turn around and leave the space. She continued to rush out of the base, hoping to find Yuan Tianxing and the others quickly. Chapter 304. But not long after she turned around and left the base, Little Man's voice suddenly came from the space again. Mommy! Come in, Mommy, come in. Lin Xiao had to come out and immediately went back in. She stood by the lake and asked, What's wrong, Man? A vine came out of the lake and wrapped around her hand. Mommy, come down. Xiao Budian's condition has been suppressed for too long. Now Man can't control it. Mommy, come down and help. Lin Xiao asked in surprise, What can I do to help? She wouldn't help others awaken their abilities. Lin Xiao continued to ask, Didn't you help Xiao Lu awaken last time? Why can't you do it this time? Man thought about it and said, Last time Sister Xiao Lu's condition was very short, so Man could control her energy, but this time Xiao Budian's condition has been for many days, although I've been suppressing it, but things can go the other way. I've suppressed too much energy. Man is afraid that Xiao Budian's little body can't take it. Lin Xiao heard this and became a bit anxious. What should I do? Can you do anything if I go down? Man said, Mommy, come down. Man will transfer a part of Xiao Budian's energy to Mommy. This will reduce the danger to Xiao Budian. Lin Xiao nodded and said, Okay then. But she thought for a moment and said, Wait a moment. Then she turned around and waved at Qiu Lily. Lily, come here. Qiu Lily and Lu Junjing were sitting on the sofa watching her. She saw Lin Xiao waving at her. Seeing Lin Xiao waving at her, she immediately got up and flashed to Lin Xiao's side. What's wrong? Lin Xiao looked at her and said, I'm going down to the lake to help Man, so I can't go find you on Tianxing and the others. You're a wind type, so you're the fastest. Can you go out and help me stop them? Qiu Lily knew Yuan Tianxing and the others, and Yuan Tianxing and the others also knew Qiu Lily. So Lin Xiao felt that if she couldn't go, it would be better for Qiu Lily to go. Because she was a wind ability zombie, and now she was level 7. Her speed was at least several times faster than her own car. He could fly directly from the top of the tree. Qiu Lily thought about it and nodded. Okay, I'll go. Oh well, I'm going too. At this moment, Meng, who had been hiding in Subspace 3, suddenly jumped out and hid behind Qiu Lily. At the same time, he carefully stared at the little vine in the lake. Lin Xiao nodded and said, There's no time to lose. I'll send you out now. Saying that, she immediately pulled the 2 zombie girls out of the space, then let go of them and came back in. As soon as Qiu Lily came out, she immediately leaped to the top of the tallest tree around. Meng looked at her from the ground. Then, the 2 of them flashed away one after the other. After entering the space, Lin Xiao wanted to take off his clothes. Suddenly, he thought of something and turned around. She saw a few heads poking out from the small space to look at her. All of you go in. Lin Xiao shouted at them and continued. If you dare to look at me undressing, I'll let little man drag you into the lake. As soon as she finished speaking, the heads disappeared without a trace. Lin Xiao felt relieved and took off his clothes, then stepped into the water. When Lin Xiao was undressing, Lu Jun covered Tong Tong's eyes and carried him to the side. After Lin Xiao entered the water, she felt the energy in the lake surging. When she was in the deep water, little man wrapped a vine as thick as a baby's arm around her waist and dragged her down. Under the water, Lin Xiao saw that little man's vines had wrapped a small human cocoon underneath. The human cocoon was reflecting a strong light. The white light shone from inside the human cocoon, turning the human cocoon into a shining white egg. It looked very cute, but Lin Xiao felt a surge of energy inside. It gave her a sense of danger, although it wasn't very strong. But from Xiao Budian's point of view, it was very dangerous. At this time, little man stretched out another 5 or 6 vines and skillfully wrapped Lin Xiao up. Then he pulled the 2 human cocoons together. After that, Lin Xiao began to feel a surge of energy slowly passing to her body. On the other side, Wu Chengyue sent Xiao Liqing to investigate Yang Chao's recent actions to see if he had sent people to harm Lingling. At the same time, he sent others to check the list of people coming in and out of the base for the past few days. If there were any suspicious people, they would make a list and give it to him. Where are you going? Hearing Wu Chengyue say he was going to find someone, Meng Yu followed behind him and asked in confusion. Special Area C, Wu Chengyue replied. Special Area C? Are you from Leader Feng's side? Meng Yu asked curiously. The base was divided into 3 areas, Special Area A, B, and C, where the officials or people with status lived and worked. The outer area was divided into 7 areas, from A to F. Each area had a living area, work area, administrative area, and so on. Special Area A was where Wu Chengyue was, and it was also the inner area he was in charge of. Special Area B was Yang Chao's area, and Special Area C was Fen Shihui's area. So when Wu Chengyue said he was going to Special Area C, everyone knew he was going to find Fen Shihui's people. This was because the people who lived in Special Area C were basically his subordinates, and some of the ordinary staff who worked for him. When they reached the lobby on the first floor of the office building, Wu Chengyue asked Meng Yu to ask if Lu Tianyi was in his office. A few minutes later, Meng Yu came back. Lu Tianyi is not in the office, he went to the shed in the plantation area. We need to go there to find him. Wu Chengyue turned and walked away. To the slums. The so-called plantation area was the area where 90% of the food in the entire base came from. In other words, it was the area where farms, crops, and animals were raised. Special Zone C was mostly made up of farmland and vegetable fields. But because there were not many people, and the land and water needed metahumans to let the plants grow normally, the harvest was not very good. If they wanted a good harvest, they could only find Logia metahumans to help them grow. But there were too few Logia metahumans. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming were watering the plants in the vegetable shed, while helping them grow. Suddenly, someone ran over from the entrance of the vegetable shed and shouted to the 2. Captain, Leader Wu is looking for you. Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming turned around and saw his subordinates at the workbench. Why is Leader Wu looking for you? Kong Qingming turned to look at Lu Qianni and asked curiously. Lu Qianni also shook his head with a blank look. How would I know? Just go out and take a look. As he said that, he wrapped his hands in a ball of water and rubbed them together. Kong Qingming also leaned over and stretched out his hands that were covered in mud and grass. Give me some too. Lu Qianni raised one of his hands and placed a ball of clean water on top of his hands, palm facing downwards. Kong Qingming washed his hands in the ball of water that did not fall, and the two walked out of the vegetable shed together. Chapter 305. There was a simple pergola outside the vegetable shed, which was used to shelter from the sun and rest. At this time Wu Chongyue and the others were standing in the pergola, looking around at the surrounding crops. Lu Qianni and Wu Chongyue came out of the vegetable shed and walked towards them. Leader Wu, what's the matter? Do you need to come to the shanty area to find me? He said to Wu Chongyue. In fact, it was quite far from Special Area A to the shanty area in Special Area C. It would take half an hour to walk there. And it was noon when the sun was very hot. Wu Chongyue turned around and saw him, then looked around. Seeing that there was no one else, he said, I want to ask you, how much do you know about the woman named Lin in Hangzhou? Lu Qianni looked at him in surprise and asked strangely, Hey, why are you asking about her? He thought to himself, could it be that Leader Wu already knows that the big sister is Lu Qianyu? Now he came to ask me for information, and was he going to deal with her? Thinking of this, Lu Qianni's heart sank slightly, but there was no change in his expression. At this time Wu Chongyue took out a note and handed it to him. He said, I want you to help me see if this handwriting is hers. Lu Qianni took the note curiously, but when he looked at it, he found that it was an unfamiliar handwriting. He knew what Lu Qianyu's handwriting looked like, but it was definitely not as sharp and imposing as the one in his hand. It was not the handwriting of the same person at all. Lu Qianni asked doubtfully, Who wrote this? I don't know. And what's the matter with the content? Was Miss Lingling taken away again? He couldn't be blamed for using the word again, because everyone in the base knew that Lingling was often taken away by bad people, and then she came back safe and sound. It was amazing. Wu Chongyue's expression faded slightly and he said, This is the note she left. I want to know now. What's your relationship with her and how much do you know about her? What kind of person is she? She's not a person. Lu Qianni replied silently in his heart, but he said with a smile, Hey, are you sure this was left by her? Also, please tell me where Miss Lingling was taken away from. Wu Chongyue said, The other party has the space and can come and go without a trace. Other than the woman I met last time, the only one who could successfully kidnap Lingling without leaving a trace was the woman I met last time. No one has ever done it before. Not only did that woman steal his zombie core silently, but from this point, he could feel that it was the same way as this time. On the way here, Wu Chongyue calmed down and analyzed. The more he thought about the space ability user he met in Hangzhou, the closer he felt he was. If it was really her, she wouldn't harm Lingling this time since she had already saved Lingling once. However, he couldn't understand why someone would steal Lingling from his house. What a strange woman. If you wanted to save my daughter, why didn't you just tell me first? Would it kill you to die? Did they want to scare him to death by suddenly taking him away? After thinking it through, Wu Chongyue felt relieved. As long as the other party was not one of Yang Chao's men, there shouldn't be any big problems. So now he had to figure out something else. Lu Qianni listened to what he said and thought it made sense. He suddenly muttered to himself in a low voice, So, she's back in the base? Wu Chongyue and the others looked at him, not understanding what Lu Qianni meant. Since you know her, you should know why she took Lingling away, right? I want to say with Lingling's current condition, whether it's a doctor or a healing ability user, it's useless. That woman called Lin, what can she do? Lu Qianni looked up at him, the lake in Lin Qiao's space flashing in his mind. She has a magical lake. Actually, I don't know what method she used to help Miss Lingling, and I don't know what Miss Lingling's condition is. It's hard for me to say. Lu Qianni pointed to the content on the paper and continued, And she seems to know Miss Lingling's condition very well. Even you can't do anything? Wu Chongyue looked around and confirmed that there was no one suspicious. Then he said to him, Lingling suddenly awakened her ability on the day she returned to the base. It was a special kind of water that we asked for from someone else that suppressed Lingling's condition. But after so many days, Lingling's condition hasn't improved. But fortunately, it hasn't worsened. Hearing Wu Chongyue's words, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming both widened their eyes and blurted out in disbelief. What? Awakened? Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming looked at each other and confirmed that they really didn't hear wrong before saying, How could it be? Miss Lingling is still so young. How could she awaken her ability? Wu Chongyue sighed and asked him, I also want to know the answer to this question. But that woman called Lin took Lingling away. Where are we going to find her now? Lu Tianyi looked at him blankly and said, Leader, to be honest, I don't know either. Actually, she told me before that she wouldn't come back to High City. Now that she suddenly appeared, I don't even know what the situation is. Maybe we can only find out when we find her in person. He heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Fortunately, this Wu Chongyue didn't discover his sister's identity. Hearing Lu Tianyi's words, Wu Chongyue's heart sank. But his handsome face didn't show anything. At this moment, Xiao Liqing ran over from afar. Leader, I found it. The others immediately looked at him. Xiao Liqing looked at Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming and hesitated for a moment. Wu Chongyue said, It's okay, you can say it. Xiao Liqing took out a piece of paper with some names and information written on it. He said, A group of people came back this morning. It's Chun Yuding and his team members from the Wind Court team. But his other team leader, Lu Chongfeng, his sister Lu Ting, and 2 other team members were not seen. Besides them, there's another team with them. The leader is called Lin Feng, and he seems to be looking for the previous deputy leader Yuan. Wu Chongyue and Meng Yu looked at him in surprise. What did you say? Lin Feng? Is he also from the original Netherworld King's base? Lu Tianyi didn't know about Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng, and looked at Kong Qingming blankly. Kong Qingming knew a little about Yuan Tianqing and the Netherworld King's base. He said, Huh? Is it the Yuan Tianqing who posted a mission to go to the center of Kung State to build a base? I heard that the treatment he gave was very good, but the location was in the center of Zombie City. So many people went to consult him, but there were also many people who came back. Only then did Lu Tianyi understand a little. However, what was the relationship between his sister and these people from the original Netherworld King's base? Chapter 306. Hearing Xiao Liqing's words, Wu Chongyue took the list and looked at it. Sure enough, there were several people with the surname Lin on the list. Why are they in the base? Didn't they say that someone had already attacked them outside? Also, Yuan Tianqing and the others left the base in the morning. Why didn't we meet them on the way? Only Wu Chongyue and Liang Dashu knew that Yang Chao had found people to attack Yuan Tianqing and his comrades. The others didn't know. Hearing this, they immediately felt that something was wrong. Xiao Liqing said, Maybe they didn't take the same route. As for why Lin Feng's team appeared here, I'm not sure yet. At the moment I'm not sure, but at least I can confirm that they weren't attacked like you said, leader. Or perhaps they were attacked but they couldn't do anything to them? Wu Chongyue looked at the list and wanted to match the name of the woman named Lin with the name on the list. But everyone's age was recorded on the list. So Wu Chongyue found that only a girl named Lin Wenwen was more likely. Is this Lin Wenwen in the base now? He pointed to Lin Wenwen on the list and asked. If it was really this person, she shouldn't be in the base. If she was in the base, then was Lingling with her? Xiao Liqing nodded and said, She is in the base. None of the people who came in have left. Wu Chongyue's expression darkened and he turned to look at him. Do you think this woman is still in the base? Xiao Liqing nodded. He suddenly thought of something and continued, Right, Huang Ming is back. And he's with Lin Feng's team. Li Zheng and the others who left with Huang Ming's team are also with him. Wu Chongyue said in surprise, They found Lin Feng's team? Xiao Liqing said, They should have. Otherwise, they wouldn't have returned to the base together. Wu Chongyue immediately turned around and said, Go find Lin Wenwen and meet these people. Then he left with the others. Thus, Lu Tianyi, who was called out for no reason and didn't understand the situation. Just like that, he watched in bewilderment as Wu Chongyue quickly left with his men to look for the woman named Lin Wenwen. However, Lu Tianyi was puzzled. What did those people from the Netherworld King's base have to do with his sister? Just because of the word the Lin? Lu Tianyi thought that Lin Xiao had said the word Lin to fool Wu Changyue. It was just that he didn't expect Wu Changyue to associate this word with a group of people from other places. Kong Qingming, who had been observing from the beginning to the end, placed his left hand across his chest. With his right elbow against his left palm, he rubbed his chin while curiously watching Wu Changyue and the others leave in a hurry. Looks like someone is stirring up trouble. And it actually involved Chief Wu. However, it shouldn't really be the one from your family, right? After all, she really did have space. This possibility was very high. Lu Tianyi. How would I know? Kong Qingming loosened his grip and clapped his hands. He said, I'll go and investigate the situation. I'll leave the rest to you. With that said, he reached out and patted Lu Tianyi on the shoulder, and then chased after Wu Changyue and the others. Lu Tianyi, who was thrown down to do additional work. Did he have to be so brazen just to watch the show? At this time, Lin Xiao, who was still in the space, felt an external energy entering her body. At the same time, there was also a suction force that was drawing out the ability in her mind. Because she believed that Little Man wouldn't harm her, she let the suction force draw out her energy. Little Man drew Lin Xiao's energy to her side, and then used her own energy to separate the violent energy in Tiny Tot's body. Most of Tiny Tot's energy converged into her little head, and a large portion was conducted by Little Man, and then transferred to Lin Xiao's body. Without Lin Xiao as a transition body, the energy in Tiny Tot's body would probably explode. Even if Little Man could try to help her guide it out, it was too dangerous. If she didn't control it well, it would cause Tiny Tot's energy to explode. On the other side, Yuan Tianxing and the others drove two modified off-road vehicles out of Shanghai and entered Jiaxing City. Halfway through the journey, the people who were driving were suddenly intercepted by a white figure that descended from the sky. Gee, there was a sudden braking sound, and Du Yuanxing's forehead almost hit the steering wheel. The other people in the car also rolled forward, and then swayed left and right. Ouch, my neck. I say, old Du, can't you give me a heads up in advance? Lin Yu, who was at the back, hit the back of Du Yuanxing's seat. Then he tilted his head and said with a grin, Fuck, do you think I want to? The car is still driving, it's 80 miles per hour, and suddenly a person ran out and blocked the front of the car. It's already very good that I can step on the brakes, Du Yuanxing said with a frightened face. As a result, when he saw the white figure in front of the car, he said in surprise, Huh? Isn't that Cho Lily? Who is Cho Lily? Lin Yu, who was at the back, twisted his neck and asked. But Yuan Tianxing, who was in the front passenger seat, immediately opened the door and got out. Seeing Yuan Tianxing get out, Du Yuanxing and the others also got out. Xiao Yunlong, who was at the back, stopped the car 2 meters behind Yuan Tianxing's car, and then the people in the car also opened the door and got out. When Yuan Tianxing saw Cho Lily, the expression on his face was very happy. He hurriedly walked in front of her, looked at her anxiously and asked, Why are you here? Where are Lin Feng and the others? Cho Lily looked at him excitedly coming over and took 2 steps back. Seeing her action, Yuan Tianxing finally reacted. He remembered that Cho Lily did not like to be close to them. You don't have to go back because the person you are looking for is now in Sea City base. Cho Lily stared at him with a pair of beautiful black and red eyes. With that, she leaped onto the roof of the car that Yuan Tianxing and the others were in. Following her movement, the others also turned their heads and shifted their gaze to the roof of the car. Yuan Tianxing was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He looked up at her in surprise and said, You mean, Lin Feng and the others have already arrived at Sea City base? How come I didn't know? Cho Lily played with her 2 long black hair as she replied, They arrived half an hour ago. At that time you had already left the base for almost 2 hours. So I came to chase you back. Hearing her say this, Yuan Tianxing's heart that had been in his throat finally relaxed. He said, So, Lin Feng and the others are all right. Cho Lily shook her head. They're fine. Yuan Tianxing breathed a sigh of relief and said, That's great. I originally heard the news that someone was preparing to deal with Lin Feng and the others. I was afraid that something would happen to them, so I wanted to go back and see the situation first. I didn't expect you to arrive at the base first. Qiu Lily shook her head and said, well, I've already stopped them. You guys quickly turn around and go back. As she spoke, she suddenly turned her head and stuck her tongue out at Xiao Tsulong, who was on the other side. She made a face at him, then disappeared in a flash. Chapter 307. Xiao Yunlong, who was grimaced. He silently put away the faintly flashing ability in his hand, then walked to Yuan Tianqing's side and asked him with a dumbfounded look, if I'm not wrong, her eyes? It was a pair of zombie eyes, and the pupil in the middle was a ruby red. This was a zombie king that was at least level 6 or above. Yuan Tianqing then noticed Xiao Yunlong's current state. He saw that his whole body was tense, and was probably ready to make a move when he saw Qiu Lily. But he probably saw him talking to Qiu Lily, so he held back. Oh, relax, relax. Don't worry, she won't hurt us. Yuan Tianqing hurriedly said to him with a smile. Xiao Yunlong still looked at him in surprise and said, you mean, she's real? It's not really what he thought. But she can talk. I must have guessed wrong. Yuan Tianqing looked at the surprised and confused expression of the tall man and said with a smile, yes, it's what you think. But I'm suddenly relieved to see her. Her appearance here means that Lin Feng and the others are really fine. Because he heard Yan Fengyu say that Yang Chao secretly sent people, the other side would certainly not just send 1 or 2 people. And the strength of the people sent would certainly not be lower than a level 6 ability user, so Lin Feng and the others really did not have the strength to resist. Even if he thought of Lin Xiao and Qiu Lily, Yuan Tianqing was still very worried. Because it was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. If the other side took advantage of their inattention to launch a sneak attack, then Qiu Lily might not be able to defend herself. And Lin Xiao also went to the central area of Hangzhou, and it was not known if he had returned. Therefore, the strongest people around Lin Feng and Qiu Lily were Lin Feng and Qiu Lily. If it was 1 or 2 level 6 ability users, then Lin Feng and the others could still deal with it. But thinking that Yang Chao colluded with the robbers outside, these people had too many means, their strength was certainly not too low, and they were some fierce and cruel people. People who could survive for a long time outside the end of the world were still very dangerous. Xiao Yunlong's face was still full of confusion. You said, she is who I think? Are you sure? Yuan Tianqing nodded and said, yes, she is a level 6 zombie king. But so she could speak? Didn't you just say before? Xiao Yunlong stared at him and then at his subordinates. He said, why are you all discussing here so calmly? Don't you think talking zombies, very magical? Xiao Yunlong also had the same expression as his subordinates in the car. Yuan Tianqing smiled and nodded. Oh yeah, it was amazing. But we've already been shocked half a month ago. Alright, we should turn around. With that, he reached out and patted Xiao Yunlong on the shoulder, then turned around and got in the car. Du Yuanqing and the others immediately retreated back into the car. Then they started the car and turned around, leaving Xiao Yunlong with an expression of, oh my god, how could there be such a thing? He turned to look at his men in the car. I think we should go back and revise our worldview. Everyone in the car nodded in unison. At that moment, Yuan Tianqing's car turned around and stopped next to him. By the way, about Lily, I hope Deputy Leader Xiao and everyone won't spread it out for the time being. I believe it won't be long before everyone knows of their existence. Yuan Tianqing stuck his head out of the front passenger window and said to Xiao Yunlong. Xiao Yunlong came back to his senses and asked him with some puzzlement, won't be long? Why? Yuan Tianqing just smiled and then retreated back into the car without saying anything. The car stirred up a cloud of dust and then drove off in the direction it came from. Xiao Yunlong blankly watched Yuan Tianqing's car leave, and then turned back to look at his people again. Then he turned around and got into the car. I think I need some time alone. On the other side, Lin Xiao did not know how long it had been. She only felt that her whole body was burning hot and very uncomfortable. The energy in her mind was constantly being drawn away by little man, and there was another energy entering her body from the other side. But as time went by, Lin Xiao suddenly felt that there was a strange force coming in along with the energy that entered her body. Lin Xiao felt that if she was not mistaken, it seemed to be a kind of vitality. This discovery made Lin Xiao jump in fright. Could this be Tiny Tot's vitality? How could her vitality spread to her side? Moreover, now that Tiny Tot's vitality was on her side, Would something happen to Tiny Tot? Just as Lin Xiao was feeling anxious, she felt that this vitality had stopped. The energy from before also stopped. Then Lin Xiao felt that there was a sudden surge of energy around her, and then instantly shrank back. After the surroundings calmed down, Little Man's vines slowly loosened her, leaving only one around her waist. Lin Xiao opened her eyes and saw the little person opposite her. Tiny Tot's eyes were closed, her long hair fluttering in the water. A faint crystal on her forehead was disappearing. It should be said that it had sunk under the skin of her forehead. At this time Little Man's voice came. Mama, take Tiny Tot up, Little Man is tired, Little Man wants to sleep. Then Lin Xiao felt that her body and Tiny Tot's body were lifted up, and then came out of the water. After Little Man lifted them out of the water, she let go of the two people. Then the vine tentacles retracted into the bottom of the lake. Lin Xiao quickly carried Tiny Tot over, and then swam towards the shore with her. On the shore, Lu Jun was waiting with two big bath towels. After Lin Xiao carried Tiny Tot out of the water, she covered Tiny Tot with a bath towel. Then she picked up another one and covered Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao handed Tiny Tot to Lu Jun and said, "She's fine now. You take her to bed first." Lu Jun took Tiny Tot, but did not immediately turn around and leave. Instead, she looked at Lin Xiao with a blank face. Lin Xiao wrapped the bath towel around her body, preparing to wipe the water off her body. Seeing Lu Jun's expression, she stopped and looked at her. "What's wrong?" Lu Jun moved her nose closer to Lin Xiao's body and sniffed. Then she said, "It feels a little strange. I don't know if there's something wrong with my nose." Lin Xiao was baffled by her actions. She raised her arm and sniffed herself like she had done. She didn't find anything wrong. "What's wrong? You have a puzzled expression on your face." Lu Jun took a step back, looked at her and thought for a moment. Then she replied, "And your strength has increased again. I feel that it's not a good thing for you to grow too fast." Lin Xiao felt the energy in her body and nodded. The energy is a little unstable." Chapter 308. Maybe it was because the energy in her mind had just been transferred from Tiny Tot, and she didn't have much energy left. That was why the new energy was surging very actively in her mind, causing an unstable situation. Lu Jun turned around and carried Tiny Tot to the sofa. She still had a confused expression on her face. She didn't say that there was another problem with Lin Xiao's unstable energy. It was that her aura had changed again. There was a strange smell in her original aura. This smell was different from the zombie smell on Lin Xiao's body. It seemed to have a kind of vitality in it, but it didn't smell like a living person's. And judging from Lin Xiao's reaction just now, she didn't seem to notice this. Also, Lin Xiao's smell was a bit like Tiny Tot's. Lin Xiao looked at her back in confusion. Then she smelled herself strangely and began to put on her clothes. After quickly putting on her clothes, Lin Xiao walked over. "How long have we been down there?" Lu Jun looked at Tong Tong, who was sitting next to her and playing happily, so she let him play. Then she held Tiny Tot and dried his hair. Hearing Lin Xiao's question, Lu Jun looked at the watch in her hand and said, "Almost 3 days." Hearing this, Lin Xiao was a little surprised. 3 days have passed? So long? No wonder Little Man is so tired that she wants to sleep. Lu Jun nodded. Then Lily and the others should be back, right? It seems that I should return Tiny Tot first. I only left a note when I brought her in. I don't know what that man will do." Lin Xiao suddenly thought that Cho Lily and the others had brought people back, so they probably wouldn't enter the base. Thinking about this, she walked to the sofa and watched Lu Jun dry Tiny Tot's dripping hair. Although it wasn't dry, at least it wasn't dripping anymore. Tiny Tot was fine now, but he hadn't slept yet. He would probably be fine once he woke up. Lin Xiao walked to the wardrobe, found a bigger t-shirt, and put it on Tiny Tot. "I'll go out and bring Lillian first, then send Tiny Tot back." Lu Jun looked at her and nodded. Lin Xiao turned around and went out in a flash. Then she turned invisible and went up to a building outside. He stood on the rooftop and tried to sense Cho Lily and Mengmeng's location. Then he leaped out of the building towards them. Cho Lily and Mengmeng were not far away. At most, they were a few hundred meters away from the base's walls. Because one of them could turn invisible, and the other was too powerful, she could retract her aura. Even the 3 level 7 arcanists in the base would not be able to sense them. Soon Lin Xiao arrived in front of them. Qiu Lili and Mingming were squatting on the roof of a building, silently counting ants in the corridor on the top floor. I don't know what happened to Xiao. He went in for so long. It's been 3 days and he still hasn't come out. Qiu Lili said with a pout as she held a small branch and chased a straggler back into the group. Roar! She brought her little sister inside. Mingming suddenly said. Qiu Lili said, well, I don't know who that little guy is. Why did Xiao save her? Roar! I've seen this little girl before. The little sister that she had snatched away last time. Mingming said angrily. Qiu Lili looked at her strangely. When did you get together with that little girl again? However, Mingming did not say anything. She just silently stared at the ants walking on the ground. Qiu Lili looked at her blankly. Seeing that Mingming did not say anything, she could only lower her head and continue counting the ants. In the end, she saw that the one that she had just rushed back had run out again. Lin Xiao appeared in front of them and said, she's the one that kidnapped that little guy when I went to Hangzhou last time. If I hadn't seen it, I don't know how much suffering that little guy would have suffered with her. As soon as she appeared, Qiu Lili and Mingming immediately turned around. Then they directly jumped up from the ground. Wow, you're finally out. You've become stronger again. Qiu Lili said happily when she saw her. Then she circled around Lin Xiao twice with slight confusion, looking her up and down. Lin Xiao nodded and raised her hand to show her claws. She said, you can say that, but I don't seem to have increased my level. But I feel that my body's strength has indeed increased again. As she said that, she suddenly waved her hand outside. Woo! A whistling sound that cut through the air rang out. Then they saw that in the direction that Lin Xiao waved her hand, the corner of another building suddenly tilted and slowly slid down. Boom! The corner of the building fell from the sky and then smashed onto the ground. It was smashed into pieces and sent up a cloud of dust. Lin Xiao visually estimated the distance between the building and her current position. It was at least 20 meters away. Qiu Lili and Mingming also looked at her in shock, then looked at the building that was missing a corner. The piece that was missing from the roof was very smooth. It was like a giant knife that had sliced off a piece of tofu. Your claw is no longer a zombie's claw. But why can your claw cut so far and mine can't? Qiu Lili looked at her with a face full of envy. Then she also extended her claw and waved it outwards. In the end there was nothing. Mingming also imitated her actions and waved her hand, but the result was the same. There was nothing. At this time Lin Xiao turned her claw over and her palm faced upwards. A wisp of black qi rose from his palm and spread into a small cloud of black mist. It floated above her palm. Seeing the black fog that Lin Xiao had released, even though it was only a small ball, Lin Xiao's eyes widened. However, Mingming and Qiu Lili subconsciously took 2 steps back, distancing themselves from the black mist-like presence in her hand. Mingming hid behind Qiu Lili. Lin Xiao herself did not feel threatened by the black mist. She looked at the two in front of her and subconsciously retreated. He asked, is it really that scary? After saying that, she retracted the black mist. Qiu Lili said, you should catch a level 6 zombie king and try it. Then you'll know. With that, she and Lin Xiao looked at Mingming, who was behind her. Roar, no. Don't grab me. Mingming's hair stood on end when she was stared at by them. In a flash, she disappeared without a trace. Lin Xiao closed his eyes slightly and saw a ball of green energy quickly flash outside. She opened her eyes and said to Mingming, okay, I'm going to take Lily into the space. If you keep hiding, I won't care about you. Qiu Lili knew that Mingming could become invisible, but she did not expect that Lin Xiao could see Mingming after she became invisible. You can see her? Lin Xiao nodded. Yes. However, Mingming did not immediately run back. Instead, she squatted on another building and looked in her direction. Lin Xiao was too lazy to care about the naughty child. She had just said something casually and ran so far away. She asked Qiu Lili, by the way, are Yuan Tianqing and the others in the base now? Qiu Lili nodded and said, yes, I saw them go in. Chapter 309. After confirming that Yuan Tianqing had returned, Lin Xiao nodded and said, "All right, I'll bring you into the space. Come." She pulled Qiu Lily into the space, then came out in stealth mode and quietly moved to Meng Meng's side. Then when she was not paying attention, she suddenly pulled her into the space. After bringing Qiu Lily and Meng Meng into the space, Lin Xiao came out again. She stealthily sneaked toward the direction of the base, then slipped into the small door at the entrance of the base without anyone knowing. The entrance of the base was not always closed. During the day, a small door would be open, and it would only close at night. A large number of soldiers were stationed around the entrance, and more than 3 rank 5 metahumans were assigned to watch the door. There was also more than one entrance in the entire base. There were 4 entrances in the north, south, east, and west. Above the entrance there was a high sentry post. The people on guard were also metahumans, and all of them were rank 4 nature-type metahumans. Because nature-type metahumans had stronger senses, they would be able to detect any movement outside the base in time. Unless it was a rank 5 zombie leader or a rank 6 king, it would be impossible to escape the detection of a rank 4 nature-type metahuman. But rank 5 and rank 6 zombies were highly intelligent and would not randomly come to the base. Because there were many metahumans in the base, and there were even rank 7 metahumans here. So even if there was a small door open with so many metahumans guarding it, the high-level zombies did not dare to approach. Because when the base was first built, there were still many high-level zombies who risked their lives for the living in the base after the zombies were wiped out. But in the end they were all killed and their zombie cores were taken. Gradually, the high-level zombies learned their lesson and did not dare to go anymore. After entering the base, Lin Xiao went in the direction of the smell coming from Lin Feng and the others. When he arrived, he found out that they were in a small district in Area D. However, Lin Xiao saw countless soldiers standing below Lin Feng's building. Why were there so many soldiers guarding the civilian area? Lin Xiao passed through the soldiers as if there was no one around and went upstairs. When he reached the floor where Lin Feng and the others were, he realized that the soldiers were coming for them. There were a few suites on this floor, and Lin Feng and the others lived in 2 of the suites. There were several armed soldiers standing at the entrance of the 2 suites. He carried his gun and stood guard there. What was going on? Lin Xiao did not understand. Where did these soldiers come from? What are you waiting here for? The doors to Lin Feng's room were closed. Lin Xiao leaned against the door and listened to the movements inside. "Xiaolu, go get a glass of water." It was Cheng Wangshue's voice. "Oh," Lin Xiaolu responded. "It's almost time to eat. The pancakes are ready. Lin Hao, take these to the opposite room." Mrs. Lin's voice comes. "Are those soldiers still guarding outside?" This was Lin Hao's voice. "I think so, but that man's daughter went missing. Why do you think we did it? And the person he's looking for seems to be Miss Lu, right?" Lin Wenwen replied. "Who knows? Miss Lu hasn't come back yet. No one knows if she took the daughter away." Mrs. Lin said, "This is someone else's base and he's the boss here. Whatever he says is true. But who is the Lin he's talking about?" Lin Hao said, "From Leader Wu's description it does seem like Miss Lu. She has space and can be invisible. And she left because of an emergency?" Lin Feng's voice came. "But speaking of which, Yuan Tianxing and the others are back. Where did Miss Lu and the others go?" Lin Xiao then realized that these soldiers were left behind by Wu Changyue. She turned to listen to the opposite door and heard Yuan Tianxing, Du Yuanxing, and Lu Junjie talking inside. At this moment, the door of the Lin's room opened and Lin Xiao immediately dodged to the side. Seeing Lin Hao open the door, the surrounding soldiers just glanced at him. They didn't do anything. Lin Hao glanced at them, then walked to the opposite room and knocked on the door. Soon the door was opened. It was Lin Yu who opened the door and saw Lin Hao outside. "Wow, there's food." In the next second, his eyes were glued to the plate in Lin Hao's hand. Lin Hao handed it to him. "Take it, my mom made it." Lin Yu happily took it and said, "Thank you, madam. Her cooking has always been great. It smells so good." Lin Hao waved at him and then turned around to go back. Lin Yu took the plate and closed the door. Lin Xiao looked at Lin Hao who had returned to this room and then looked at Lin Yu's door. And why did Wu Changyue send people to guard here? It didn't seem like he wanted to restrict their feelings. Looking at the accommodation here, the houses were much better than ordinary people's, and they were living in suites. Although it wasn't the level of an apartment, this small district was still very good. However, although these districts had elevators because of the lack of power, the elevators were all in a state of strike. The people who lived here could only take the stairs. Lin Xiao thought about it and guessed that Wu Changyue must have checked the list of people who went in and out of the base that day. Then he saw Lin Feng and the others, so he suspected them. Wu Qingyue's guess was not wrong. His suspicion was right. It was just that Lin Xiao didn't expect that it would take more than 3 days for him and Little Man to awaken Tiny Tot's ability. Thinking about it, 3 days had passed. Wu Qingyue should be going crazy, right? At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly felt someone coming up the stairs. She knew this breath. It was the deputy leader under Wu Changyue. After a while, she saw Xiao Yunlong come up with a few subordinates. Then he went directly to the Lin family's house. Deputy leader. Seeing Xiao Yunlong coming, several soldiers at the door immediately greeted him. Xiao Yunlong nodded to them, then blocked the door of Lin Feng's room, raised his hand and knocked on the door. The door was quickly opened, and it was Lin Hao who came to open the door. He was holding a pancake in his hand, putting it in his mouth while opening the door. When he saw Xiao Yunlong at the door, his expression froze for a moment. "Hello, our leader wants to invite Mr. Lin Feng over. I don't know if it's convenient." Xiao Yunlong stood outside the door looking down at him and said with a smile. After Lin Hao heard his words, he turned back and shouted into the house, "Brother, Leader Wu invites you over." The people who were preparing to eat at the table all stopped for a moment and looked silently at the door. Lin Feng stood up from the sofa and said to Mrs. Lin, "Mom, you eat first. I'll go over." With that, he walked out of the door. "Please wait a moment." Seeing Lin Feng come out, Xiao Yunlong suddenly said. Then he turned and walked to the door of Yuan Tianqing's room and knocked on the door. Lin Feng silently watched Xiao Yunlong knock on the door, and then invited Yuan Tianqing out. Then he invited the two of them downstairs. Chapter 310. Lin Xiao silently followed behind them and saw that there was a car parked upstairs. Xiao Yunlong invited Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing to the back seat. Then he got into the front passenger seat, and the car drove towards the inner area. Lin Xiao jumped and gently landed on the roof of the car. "I don't know if Leader Wu is looking for us because there is news of Miss Lingling?" Yuan Tianqing, who was familiar with Xiao Yunlong, asked. Xiao Yunlong replied in front. "Not yet. I invited you two over today just for a meal. It's been 3 days. I don't know how Lingling is now." I hope nothing has happened." Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other and Yuan Tianqing said, "Who took Miss Lingling away? Leader Wu hasn't found any news?" Xiao Yunlong looked back at him and said, "There are some clues, but the problem is that we can't find the target. We can't find any trace of that person." Yuan Tianqing said, "If the person you are talking about is really the person we know, then Miss Lingling will certainly be fine." Lin Feng asked at this time, "I want to ask, what happened to Miss Lingling?" He always felt that this Wu Changyue, when his daughter was taken away, did not seem to be worried about what would happen to her, but worried that something would happen to his daughter. Yuan Tianqing and Xiao Yunlong looked at each other. They had not revealed that Lingling was in a state of awakening, so Lin Feng did not know the situation. Xiao Yunlong glanced at Yuan Tianqing, then said to Lin Feng, "Because Lingling began to awaken her ability a few days ago, because Mr. Yuan gave Lingling some special water to drink. She has been suppressing it and did not continue to awaken. But after you came that day, Miss Lingling disappeared." Although he left behind a note, Lin Feng asked in surprise, "Note? What note?" Yuan Tianqing also looked at Xiao Yunlong blankly. He had not heard of any note before. Xiao Yunlong took out his mobile phone and showed the photo of the note. After the end of the world, all satellites could not be used and there was no signal all over the world. So the mobile phone was useless, at least there was no communication function. But some games that could be played without the internet could still be played after downloading. There were also some downloaded movies that could be watched. In addition to these, many functions of the mobile phone could still be used. For example, taking pictures. "Do you recognize the word she wrote?" Xiao Yunlong asked as he passed the photo on his mobile phone to the back. Lin Feng and Zhang Xian craned their necks to take a look and realized that the handwriting on the screen was indeed very familiar. "Is it really her?" Xiao Yunlong immediately turned to stare at the two people, asking, "Are you sure? Are you two together?" Lin Feng said, "If you had taken this out earlier, you wouldn't have had to investigate anything. It is indeed her." Xiao Yunlong said, "Who is she? Who are they?" Yuan Tianqing looked at Lin Feng, then turned to Xiao Yunlong and said, "She is not human." Xiao Yunlong was taken aback, and then looked at the two of them blankly. Suddenly, he thought of the girl with two long ponytails who suddenly appeared in front of their car 3 days ago. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at Yuan Tianqing in shock. "No way. You mean she's also that?" Yuan Tianqing looked at the driver and didn't say anything. Lin Feng looked at the two of them in confusion. Yuan Tianqing said to him, "He has seen Qiu Lily." With that, Lin Feng immediately understood. Owen nodded. Xiao Yunlong looked at Lin Feng's reaction and immediately knew that Lin Feng also knew the situation. "You wait a minute, what is your relationship with those, them? And you even brought them into the base." Lin Feng said, "If they want to come in, no one can stop them. Even if you 3 leaders work together, you can't find her. Besides, they are not bad." After that, he and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other, understanding in their hearts. Since it was Lin Qiao who took Lingling away, there must be no problem. And if it is an awakened ability, Lin Feng suddenly said, "Hey? Did you say before that Miss Lingling has awakened her ability? If that is the case, there is no need to worry. She really has a way." Xiao Yunlong's mind was a little confused at this time, and now he suddenly heard Lin Feng say this. He looked at Lin Feng with some confusion and asked, "What do you mean?" Lin Feng said, "If it is an awakened ability, she may be able to help Lingling pass smoothly." Xiao Yunlong and Yuan Tianqing both looked at him with a puzzled expression. Lin Feng said, "You also know my daughter. In fact, she has also awakened her ability. Not long ago." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the two people looking at him in surprise. Yuan Tianqing stared at him with a look of disbelief and asked, "Is what you said true? Why didn't I know?" Lin Feng said, "I told everyone not to disclose this matter, so you didn't know." The expression on Xiao Yunlong's face slowly changed from surprise to shock, and then to surprise. He looked at Lin Feng incredulously. "Is what you said true? Your daughter has really awakened her ability?" Lin Feng nodded and said, I hope Deputy Leader Xiao won't spread this matter. And it is that person who helped, only she can do this. So she took Miss Lingling away and said she was helping. She must be helping Miss Lingling, I can guarantee it." Xiao Yunlong saw that he was so sure and turned back happily. "That's great. If that's the case, I'm relieved. But who is that person you are talking about?" As he spoke, he looked back at the two people behind him. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other and said at the same time, "You will know when the time comes." Xiao Yunlong looked at them in confusion. 10 minutes later, the car drove into the Special A area of the inner district, and then drove all the way to Wu Chengyue's house. When they got off the car, they saw that Xiao Liqing was already waiting at the gate. "The food is ready waiting for you." He came over with a smile. Xiao Yunlong immediately took the two people in, and led them directly in the direction of the dining room. Wu Chengyue rolled up his sleeves and served the dishes. Meng Yu's figure was walking in the kitchen. "You two are here? Come, come, come. The time is just right, this is the last dish. Please sit down." Wu Chengyue put the last big bowl of soup on the table, and then together with Xiao Yunlong, pulled out a chair for Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng. Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng looked at each other, sat down and said politely, "Thank you." Wu Chengyue said with a faint smile, "Why are you so polite? I had said before that I would treat you to a meal, but I have been too busy these days." When he finished, he also pulled out the main seat and sat down. Xiao Yunlong pulled out another chair and sat down. Then he looked in the direction of the kitchen. Chapter 311. The four people did not notice that Lin Qiao quietly walked to the table. Then she bent down to smell the dishes on the table. But when it came to cooked food, she couldn't smell anything. At this time Yuan Tianqing said, "Leader Wu, you didn't invite us here for a simple meal." Xiao Yunlong took the soup bowls in front of them and began to serve them soup. Wu Chengyue heard this and said with a faint smile, "I do have something to ask you. But we can talk while eating." Come, drink the soup first, or it won't taste good when it's cold. Seeing Xiao Yunlong serve them soup, Wu Chengwei said. Yuan Tianxing and Yuan Tianxing had to drink the soup first. Well, the soup is good. Lin Xiao saw that they were eating and wanted to hear some information. But she couldn't hear it for the time being. She turned into the space and saw Lu Jun put Xiao Budian on the bed. Xiao Budian had not woken up, lying flat. He was covered with a quilt. Tong Tong might be tired from playing and had fallen asleep on the sofa. Lin Xiao went to the bed and touched Xiao Budian's hair, which was already dry. It was probably Xiadong who helped her dry it. Xiadong had no sense of existence, but in fact he was also in the space. Of course, when Lin Xiao took off her clothes and went into the water, he silently ran into the woods. Lin Xiao picked up Xiao Budian. Seeing her movements, Lu Jun asked, "Are you going out?" Lin Xiao nodded. At this time Wu Chengwei, Yuan Tianxing and others were eating lukewarm, because Wu Chengwei didn't speak. Finally, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianxing, who had been holding back for a while, spoke first. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to eat peacefully. "Leader Wu, if you don't say it, then let us talk first. Just now Deputy Leader Xiao has already shown us the handwriting on that note, and we do recognize who wrote those words," Lin Feng said. Wu Qingyue's hand paused, turning to look at Xiao Yunlong. Xiao Yunlong nodded his head. "She's with you? But I checked the base's entry and exit records and there is no name of her." Wu Chongyue turned to look at Lin Feng and said doubtfully. He had compared all the names on the list of suspicious people, and all of them matched up. But he didn't see the woman's name. Did she not register when she came in? After thinking about it, Wu Chongyue remembered that Lin Xiao could turn invisible. All right, if the other party had entered invisibly, then there was indeed no need to register. However, being invisible did not mean that he would disappear. When he passed through the door, he would still be detected by various instruments. Body temperature, heartbeat, and breathing would all cause the detector to fluctuate. Then how did the other party get in? Or jump over a 7 or 8 meter high wall? Yuan Tianxing said, "We're on the same side." However, she was invisible. Wherever he goes, he appears and disappears like a ghost. Wu Chongyue put away the indifference on his face and said worriedly, "But why did she sneak in and take the child away? Does she really have a way to help Lingling get through this?" Yuan Tianxing turned to face Lin Feng. Lin Feng glanced at him and said to Wu Chongyue, "She does have a way. My daughter, Xiao Lu, also awakened her ability not long ago. And it was her who helped her successfully awaken it. Although I only saw it once, I don't know if Miss Lingling's situation is the same as my Xiao Lu's. However, it's always better to believe and hope than to be disappointed." Wu Chongyue looked at him in shock. "Wait, did you just say that your daughter also awakened her ability? Is that true?" Of course, he knew that Lin Feng's daughter Lin Xiaolu was only 2 years older than Lingling. However, the problem was, how did Lin Feng's daughter awaken her ability at such a young age? This was already the second. No, Lingling was the second child that he knew of to awaken her ability. What was going on? How did a child awaken her ability at such a young age? Lin Feng nodded. "Yes, although I don't know the reason. However, we discovered it the moment Xiao Lu awakened. Then it was the person who left you the note that helped Xiao Lu get through this," Yuan Tianxing said to Wu Chongyue. "So you can rest assured now. Since she took Lingling away, she must be confident." Wu Chongyue calmed himself down and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Who is this person you're talking about?" At this moment, Lin Feng looked at him strangely and said, "Actually, you already know her. Didn't you ask us if we've seen a short-haired woman wearing a hat and sunglasses? That's her. It's just that the name you mentioned is different from what we know. That's why we're not sure if you're talking about the same person." Wu Chongyue asked, "Isn't her name Lin? She said it herself. You've seen the note, isn't it her signature?" Thinking of the word Lin on the note, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianxing both had a strange feeling in their hearts. "Are you talking about me?" Suddenly, a hoarse voice came from the side. Hence, they were stunned for a second before turning their heads to look in the direction of the voice. Then they saw a woman wearing a hat and sunglasses standing 2 or 3 meters away from them. Her face could not be seen clearly. She was carrying a child in her arms. Bam! Wu Chongyue stood up abruptly. The chair swayed from his movement and made a sound. Lingling. He immediately recognized that the child in the woman's arms was his precious daughter. Seeing that he was about to rush over, Lin Xiao suddenly took 2 steps back. Hey wait, let's make this clear first. I've returned your daughter to you in one piece. She's not sick or in trouble. She's just asleep now, she won't wake up in another 1 or 2 hours. If you dare to touch me again, I'll take Tiny away next time. Wu Chongyue stopped in his tracks because of what she said. Listening to what she said, it was a little normal at the beginning. Why did she start threatening him later on? Hey, when did you come back? How's Miss Lingling? Yeah, how's Lingling? Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng immediately came to the rescue and looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. I've never left. I was just outside the base, Lin Xiao said as she slowly walked over to Wu Chongyue and passed the child to him. She also had to be in case this person suddenly struck her with lightning. It wasn't the first time anyway. Wu Chongyue quickly carried the child over and touched Lingling's forehead and neck. There was a pulse and her body temperature had returned to normal. Her chest was also moving up and down gently. After checking that there was nothing wrong with his daughter, Wu Chongyue's heart was finally at ease. Hearing what Lin Xiao said, this woman clearly didn't get the point. How's Lingling's condition now? He raised his head and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said, You'll know when Tiny wakes up. As she said that, her figure flashed. She disappeared on the spot. At this moment, Meng Yu walked to Wu Chongyue's side and held little Yueling's hand to carefully feel it. She realized that there was indeed nothing wrong with little Yueling's body. Lingling seems to be fine, she said as she looked up at Wu Chongyue. Chapter 312. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other and said, Why do I feel that Miss Lu has been here for a long time? Yuan Tianqing nodded and asked, When did she come back? Wu Chongyue was walking to the living room with Lingling in his arms when he heard their conversation. He stopped and turned around to ask, Her surname is Lu? Lin Feng nodded and was about to reply, Oh, her name is Lu. Suddenly Yuan Tianqing interrupted him strangely, That's right. Her surname is Lu. That's right. Lin Feng looked at him with a baffled expression. However, they had known each other for so long. However, he could tell that there was something fishy going on when Yuan Tianqing interrupted him. Wu Chongyue looked at Yuan Tianqing suspiciously, and saw that the man was smiling as if it was an accident. At this moment, Lingling's eyelids moved and she slowly opened. Wu Chongyue, who was looking at Yuan Tianqing, didn't notice, but Meng Yu, who was next to him, did. Look, Lingling is awake. Everyone immediately looked at Wu Chongyue's arms. As expected, Wu Yueling opened her eyes and was looking around blankly. However, when she saw everyone looking at her, she immediately turned her head and burrowed into Wu Chongyue's arms. Lingling, Lingling, come look at Daddy. Tell Daddy if you feel uncomfortable. Wu Chongyue looked at her in surprise and hurriedly carried her to the sofa. Wu Yueling peeked out from his arms and looked at him with her bright eyes before burrowing back into his arms. He saw that his daughter was awake and there was nothing wrong with her reaction. Wu Chongyue heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Wu Yueling suddenly felt around her body with her hands, but she didn't feel anything. Then she sat up from Wu Chongyue's arms and sat on his lap, looking down at her clothes in confusion. It's not my clothes. It's so big, however. Wu Yueling soon forgot about her clothes. She searched around her body and found that her baby was gone. So she started looking left and right. Sometimes she went around to Wu Chongyue's left and then to his right. She didn't see anything. Realizing that her baby was not in the living room, Wu Yueling pouted and knocked her face. She raised her head and looked at Wu Chongyue with tears in her eyes. What is she looking for? Lin Feng still understood children. After all, he also had a daughter. She should be looking for her grass dragonfly, Wu Chongyue said after thinking for a moment. After he said that, he saw Wu Yueling nodding her head vigorously. Wu Chongyue said with a smile, Don't worry, your treasure is in your room. Are you hungry? Let's go up and change first, then come down to eat, okay? Hearing that she was going back to her room, she would be able to see her grass dragonfly. Wu Yueling immediately nodded cheerfully. Wu Chongyue lovingly stroked her long hair. Stroking his daughter's smooth black hair, he felt as if his heart was filled with something. Oh, I'll bring Lingling upstairs to change first. Yunlong, invite Mr. Lin and Mr. Yuan to the dining table again. Xiao Yunlong watched as Wu Changyue stood up with Wu Yueling in his arms, and immediately nodded his head. Oh, both of you. Please go to the table and sit down first. We haven't finished eating yet. Xiao Yunlong said and gestured in the direction of the dining table. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianxing were relieved to see that Wu Yueling had been returned in good condition. The two of them smiled and consciously walked towards the dining table after Wu Changyue finished speaking. Hey, why did Miss Lu leave as soon as she came? Yuan Tianxing asked curiously. Are you sure she left? Lin Feng looked at him strangely. At this time Xiao Yunlong also asked curiously, yes, that Miss Lu really woke Lingling up. And did little Lingling really awaken her special ability? Lin Feng said, you have to ask your Miss Lingling to know. Maybe we can ask when we go back. Yuan Tianxing said at this time, but the security in Leader Wu's house still needs to be strengthened. Just let her come and go without a trace, okay? At this time, Meng Yu, who had followed them to the dining table without saying a word, suddenly said, if even I and brother you can't find her, then it's useless to add more guards. The three men were stunned for a moment, thinking that the person had appeared silently beside them with Lingling, and no one present had noticed. In this way, it was indeed useless to strengthen the security. Xiao Yunlong said, if she is sent to gather intelligence or assassinate, if she is not very strong, who can stop her? While they were curious about the success rate of Lin Qiao's sneak attack and assassination, Wu Changyue carried Lingling upstairs. Lingling, do you remember anything? Wu Changyue asked as he walked to the room on the third floor. Wu Yueling sat in his arms and looked at him blankly. Wu Changyue saw her expression and knew that she didn't know anything. He opened the door of Wu Yueling's room and walked in. Then he put her on the bed and turned to the wardrobe to find clothes. As soon as Wu Yueling sat on the bed, she immediately turned and climbed to the table. There was a greenish-yellow grass dragonfly on the table beside the head of the table. She stretched out her little hand to pick up the grass dragonfly and smiled happily. Wu Changyue just finished looking for clothes and saw Wu Yueling sitting on the bed, both hands holding the grass dragonfly, a bright smile on her cute little face. He hadn't seen his daughter smile so sweetly for a long time. Wu Changyue felt something melting in his heart. Holding the clothes in his hand, he didn't want to disturb her. On the other side, Lin Xiao had just entered the space and hadn't reached the furniture area on Lu Jun's side. She had just taken 2 steps when her feet suddenly sank, and then there was a small tug on the bottom of her trousers. Lin Xiao looked down and saw a large ball of gray hair curled up on her feet, but it was using its rabbit lips to bite her trousers. Oh, it's a gray rabbit. Seeing Lin Xiao looking down at herself, the gray rabbit immediately released her trousers. Then it jumped down from her feet, and then bounced around her feet. What are you doing? Lin Xiao looked at the rabbit blankly, not knowing what it was doing. And although she could hear the thoughts of zombies, or perhaps she could also sense the thoughts of humans, but she couldn't hear the thoughts of small animals at this time, a small figure ran over and excitedly ran towards the little rabbit. Lin Xiao saw that it was Tong Tong, and then saw Lu Jun walking over from behind. Maybe Tong Tong's running startled the gray rabbit. It was anxious and fiercely bit Lin Xiao's trousers and dragged her to the side. This time it used several times more strength than before. Does it want you to take it out? It was just staying by that little girl's side. And when you ran away, it started running around. I don't know what it's doing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.